In the dark office, Tadashi fumes about having to deal with these disgusting paper documents, even in the 21st century, looks at the clock with its hands showing a late hour, and worries he may not make the last train home. The main character was about to leave when the monitor's glow caught his eye, and a beautiful landscape filled the screen, so he pictured how quiet country life with its calm and simplicity could give him the peace he longed for. A pang tightens his chest, then he suddenly snaps back, remembers the train, and hurriedly mumbles that if he does not leave right away, he risks not getting home tonight. Boxes of papers suddenly fall on him with a loud crash. He cries out in surprise and swears as the heavy pile of documents collapses on top of him, pinning him down. Looking at the blood on his hands, he bitterly realizes the injustice, asks himself why he had to work overtime today, and knows that even if he called for help, no one would come. Looking up at the desk with the computer, he says in despair that he will miss the last train, reaches for his phone to call, and quickly realizes it is pointless because to others, he is already nothing more than a shadow. His gaze returns to the monitor showing a farm scene, and he notes with fascination that it looks like the end of everything. Darkness fills his vision, and his consciousness slowly fades. Waking up, he finds himself in a strange, unfamiliar place. A voice calls him a lost soul, and a beautiful girl appears. She greets him, says this is Avesta, and introduces herself as Arya, the goddess of beginnings, and Tadashi, confused, asks her to wait. The goddess gently points out that he still does not understand what is happening, and explains he was brought into the world of Esther after dying on Earth, while Tadashi, stunned, realizes the truth, clenches his fists, and thinks his death was truly senseless. Tadashi can hardly believe his eyes as he looks around and wonders whether this is paradise, but he quickly remembers Arya's words about another world, and the goddess tells him he has a chance to be reborn and start over in a new reality, leaving Tadashi stunned and asking again. She confirms her words, saying this is a unique chance to live life a second time. His soul is extremely pure, so he is worthy of the blessing. Raising her hands, she loudly calls on the gods to answer her request. Majestic gods stand before him. Arya explains they are her family, the 12 gods of the Avesta, and tells him he has the right to choose one to receive a blessing. He surveys them, noting their variety, and suddenly notices an old man. A young man approaches the old man in the hat, asks forgiveness, and speaks to him. The old man first asks him to repeat himself, then introduces himself as Kronos, the god of agriculture, and the hero, stunned and unable to believe his ears, asks the old man again. The old man suddenly turns away and says he will speak no more, telling the young man to leave, and adds that the youth will likely find forest work boring and will not want to take such a blessing for a new life in another world. The old man continues, saying that if the young man seeks heroism, he should turn to the god of heroes, or choose the wise goddess Mia, whose power will bring him glory and greatness. Sages are especially popular now, he says, because their magic seems limitless. With Mia's blessing, he could master that magic. Still, he objects and admits he prefers farming, odd as that may sound. The old man stops, stunned, and asks to make sure the boy is serious and that he heard him correctly. The boy replies firmly that he has always wanted to spend his life in a quiet village and that the blessing of the god of agriculture suits him perfectly. Stunned, Rampus still can't believe it and awkwardly asks whether he truly wants it, adding that if he'd dreamed of becoming a master, the volcanic god would be a better choice. Then the boy asks Kronos what exactly he can offer. Pleased by the question, the god of agriculture explains that the agrarian world is not just about plowing fields, but also includes forestry, fishing, animal husbandry, brewing, cooking, and crafts, and the list could go on forever. Listening closely, the hero decisively tells the elder he trusts him, calling him Mr. Kronos. The old man suddenly cannot hold back his tears. Confused, the boy asks whether the old man is crying because of his words. The old man replies that he cannot hold back his tears because 10,000 years have passed since the world was created. More than 2,000 souls have passed through this place, and this is the first time anyone has chosen farming. The hero, surprised, asks again if that is true. Kronos wakes and admits he still hasn't asked the man's name. The protagonist introduces himself as Tadashi. The old man nods approvingly and says it is a beautiful name. Still surprised by the young man's choice, he almost says in disbelief that it is strange to be reborn and begin as a farmer, then quickly adds the youth will not regret it, and turns to Arya, and the goddess, curious, asks what it is about. The old man says he won't have another chance and asks Arya to pass all his powers to Ono Tadashi, even if it costs him his life, and the goddess solemnly says she understands. Kronos turns to the young man and says he is giving him all his power. A bright light flares around them. The young man stares at his hand in shock and asks what the strange mark is. They tell him it is the sign declaring him the chosen savior of the world. He looks closely at the symbol on his hand. It is the blessing of the god of agriculture, the 7 stars. At that moment, someone shouts to old Kronos, demanding he stop and wait. The god of heroes and Mia, the goddess of wisdom, appear before them. Mia demands an explanation and says he has lost his mind because giving a person 7 stars is strictly forbidden. Kronos angrily asks why she is interfering and urges everyone to look more closely. He then repeats sarcastically what kind of rules those are, and the god of heroes replies that he has no objection, but humans have always been given at most 5 stars. Mia supports him, adding firmly that even if it is just farming, giving someone 7 stars is unacceptable, and reminds everyone that the laws of this world are unchanging, and even Lady Arya will not let anyone break them without consequences. The protagonist turns to Arya, doubtful, and asks if it is really true. The old man, angry, sharply cuts him off, telling him to be quiet and just listen to his words. The grandfather firmly orders silence and insists that farming is the foundation of human life. Arya steps forward, asks to be heard, and appeals to the goddess of wisdom, revealing that the world is on the brink of destruction. She adds that in that case, Avest will face death. Mia falls silent, embarrassed, her face full of confusion because she has no answer to what was said. Arya says the world remains underdeveloped because most people still fight over land, while hunger and poverty are everywhere. Then she asks Mia how many people she has blessed since 2024, and Mia replies uncertainly that it is about 533. Arya then turns to Gelkabalt and points out he empowered at least 800 people, and the god of heroes confirms her claim without objection, accepting it as true. Arya adds that in rare cases 4 people became dragons after receiving the monster god's blessing, 24 more became demon lords under Diabel, the demon god, and 6 master blacksmiths received a gift from Vulcan. She stresses that Tadashi was the first to choose the god of farming, and his power is not combative, so even 7 stars will not make him a warrior. But their purpose is completely different. Arya says the more food there is in the world, the better it will become. But Mia answers sharply that no matter how much Arya explains, she will not accept it, looks at the young man with contempt, asks whether he really is Ono Tadashi, and he replies yes, wondering what will happen next. The goddess asks why he will not pick someone else now, saying his soul is great and he deserves better than simple farming. Kronos is angry, and the girl asks what the problem is. Kronos addresses Mia and Gelkabalt, but stops when he remembers the hero needs tools. So he suggests asking Vulcan and says he vouches for Tadashi because he gave him his blessing, and Mia reacts angrily and asks who he thinks he is. The god of agriculture solemnly declares that this boy is the world's hope, warning that the monsters are too strong, and even with his blessing, Tadashi will remain weak in battle because one gift is not enough. Mia replies that this cannot be true, since no one has ever received multiple blessings. The old man accuses her of pettiness and insists that to survive in Avesti, the young man must fight. He turns to the god of heroes and asks whether the god agrees, saying it is to save the world. The god apologizes and refuses. The god of farming falls to his knees, surprising everyone. The hero reacts in shock, since gods should not bow to one another. The old man explains he is too weak, and this is the only thing he can give Tadashi. Secretly, Gelkabalt thinks Kronos has gone too far. Finally, the god of heroes hesitantly agrees and asks Kronos to raise his head. Declaring he will give the hero his blessing, exactly 1 star, he reaches out and asks Tadashi to touch, and a glow spreads around them. Kronos turns to Vulcan and says it's his turn. Vulcan agrees but says he can't give even 1 star. asks what the problem is, and turns to Tadashi. Tadashi, feeling low, thinks his standing is very poor, but agrees. God explains that by giving blessings, they strengthen their own faith through the Chosen One, so they must take something back from him. The hero apologizes, flustered, and says he has no money. Vulcan falls silent in surprise, then laughs loudly and calls him amusing. Vulcan says the payment is not money and can be taken later. It could be a simple shrine or altar. The boy immediately understands that it is a place of worship. The god of smithing jokes that he'd rather have good wine and tasty food, but adds that the young man is the first to choose farming. Tadashi thanks him sincerely and turns to the god of heroes to ask what he wants. God says he does not want to give a blessing at all, and Tadashi, surprised, says he can take it back if he wants. But God only sighs, says the young man is well raised and should forget it because it is not just a gift, and finally adds that the most important thing is not to stain the heart. The goddess of beginnings speaks to the hero and asks if he is ready. He nods solemnly and thanks her sincerely. Arya tells him he must now protect the blessings she gave in the mortal world. Smiling gently, she wishes him a happy life. The boy stares at her, confused, and a moment later she snaps her fingers. A young man finds himself among white clouds and shouts in surprise. Trees appear before his eyes, and a second later, his body slams into the ground. Stunned, he looks around and asks where he has ended up. Before him stretches an endless desert. This is Avesta, the subcontinent of the border world. Praenus descends from the sky, greets the main character, and, smiling, says a few words. Tadashi looks at him in surprise, and the elder says he will briefly explain the situation. The boy, confused, says he does not understand anything. The old man looks over the landscape, names the mountains, rivers, forests, and plains, and adds that the location does not matter because everything needed for the homestead is here. Tadashi is surprised to find the land clean and untouched. Having dreamed of farming in a quiet town, he now finds himself in a remote wasteland. He says he is glad to finally do what he has wanted his whole life, but does not understand why they must start from nothing. The old man explains that only this territory remains unspoiled by people. He adds that every country imposes heavy taxes on such activity, and the boy is stunned because he had no idea even another world has taxes. The old man asks if he still wants to go to any country, since there he would have to pay huge taxes and endure humiliations from the aristocracy. The hero replies that he should keep explaining. For the first time, he sees gods in a fantasy world laying all their cards on the table. Local farmers are poor and barely survive under crippling taxes. Some would call it a test from the gods, but he knows it is not. The old man says all the countries in this world are stuck in wars and corruption, and only he can save them, adding he would not want the boy to have to face the worst of this world. Tadashi, moved, replies that the old man is very kind and thanks him sincerely. A young man asks God if these lands are really uninhabited, and the old man says this subcontinent is called Limbo and is believed to be cut off from divine blessing, so the land here is cursed. The old man says the local rocks and trees are harder than iron, so any tool breaks easily. The river runs with deadly poison instead of water. He insists no one could live here. The hero angrily asks how he could survive. The old man angrily asks to be heard, and says these lands were rejected by the gods, which is why everything here is so bad. But the young man has the blessing of the god of agriculture and the power of the 7 stars, so things are now different. The hero asks how to use the power, and the old man says he must first dip his hands in the river, but the boy responds in shock and objects because the water is poisonous. He reaches out to the river, thinking it is the same deadly poison. Suddenly light flares and the water clears. The old man says it is safe to drink now. Tadashi looks surprised but agrees. The grandfather explains that his blessing can purify any water, and the boy is delighted and sincerely grateful. God warns it is too early to rejoice, because after being brought to this world, his body returned to being 20, and he is no longer affected by sickness or injury, which is why the young man realizes he felt a strange lightness in his body from the first moment. The god of farming says he has a small farewell gift for him. The old man looks at the boy intently. Tadashi asks what it is. The old man says it is a magic bag. the perfect tool for farming with endless storage where time has no effect and food inside will not spoil. The boy asks if he can really take her. The old man awkwardly says that, aside from secretly taking her from the treasury, the answer is yes. Tadashi objects that this is not acceptable. God calms him, saying the goddess will apologize later, and that since she did not give him a blessing, she should now pay with artifacts. The young man says he will do anything to gain her forgiveness and asks what sacrifice she wants. But the old man tells him not to worry and adds that when she is angry, it is best to leave her alone. Then God urges the conversation to continue and reminds that the hero realized the purified water is safe to drink, saying they should move on to find food. The old man tells the young man to put some water in his bag and keep it. When he does, God praises him and says he will have to manage that way until he finds clay and makes a pot. The hero pours a little water from his bag and, smiling, says it could serve as a makeshift bowl. But something strange suddenly catches his attention. A fish suddenly swims into the bag. The boy cries out in surprise, stammering as he asks again whether it really was a fish. And the old man replies happily that it was and warmly congratulates him on his first catch, saying now they have food. The old man encourages the boy to walk through the woods to look for something useful. The trees there are bare. The boy bends down and picks up a branch. He is amazed that these trees really are magical and seem made of iron. The old man asks if he found anything. Tadashi confirms this, saying he is surprised because the blessing even lets him understand the local plants. The old man explains that this is natural, since at his level of analysis it is perfectly normal. The only thing he did not understand was why Alicia's herb was needed. The god of farming said he was lucky because the herb is top grade and named for the healing goddess Alicia, but it should not be here, and he was puzzled how the young man had found it. The old man says the goddess herself may have seen them and decided to help. The boy says he must thank her and will plant grass at the first chance, and the grandfather praises him for his kindness. He asks what they will plant here and says they must prepare the soil first. Meanwhile, the boy is doing something behind his back, and when the old man turns, he sees a homemade tool in the boy's hands and praises his cleverness. Tadashi says the tool turned out almost as he planned, though he meant to make a shovel and ended up with a hoe, and Grandpa calms him, saying this is a great start to farming from scratch, then solemnly declares the goal is set and urges everyone to work wholeheartedly. The boy thinks this is his first blow with a tool on this land. Counting off, he lowers the hoe, which with a rumble splits the earth. Suddenly, a huge area of ground splits open. The god of farming cries out in stunned disbelief, and the hero lets out a shocked gasp. The old man shouts in surprise again. The boy asks what happened. The boy is utterly astonished, and the old man's face shows plain shock. He finally says they should ask the boy himself, and asks what the boy just did. Tadashi replies that he just followed his advice and put his whole heart into it. God murmurs thoughtfully, and the hero asks if there is a problem. The old man takes a handful of earth and thinks the young man not only worked it but made it more fertile. The old man admits he does not know, since no one has ever received the blessing of the god of agriculture, and he never thought the god's power could do such a thing, and he suggests the hero himself influenced the outcome because people's wishes can work wonders. At that moment, words about human desires trigger a memory in Tadashi. A familiar image appears, the same computer screensaver showing nature. The protagonist admits he always dreamed of doing exactly this, and the old man smiles, says he always knew he was a good boy, and urges him to pour water on the ground to test the blessing's power. Tadashi pours water on the soil and watches it take on a natural color. The old man suggests planting something simple, like grass. Tadashi remembers the grass from Alicia he had with him. He plants a plant and it immediately shoots up, and he, thrilled, says it is growing too fast and wonders how that could be possible. The old man mumbles that he feels his power flowing out and that it acts as a blessing, allowing any plant to grow in just 3 days. The boy thanks him and says that now everything is gradually becoming clearer. Surprised by his calm, the old man suggests taking the animal bones found along the road, grinding them into powder, and using them as fertilizer. The hero sprinkles bone meal on the plant and it starts growing even faster. Tadashi gasps with delight, and the old man says even the fertilizer works better here, so at that pace he could grow a big tree in 2 days. The old man suggests they try growing something else, and the boy eagerly agrees. But God notes that night is falling, and they must chop wood for a fire. The hero hesitates, saying it would be a shame to cut down a tree that has only just started to grow, and folds his hands as if apologizing to it. Despite this, he starts chopping wood and asks God if he should dry the wood by the fire first. The old man says he will explain everything now. The man says fresh wood is too wet to burn, but the hero's power will dry it in just 3 days. The boy agrees it's not that long. Reassuring him, the old man says not to worry and offers a better way. Suggesting they squeeze the tree, the hero reacts with surprise, and the old man nods, comparing it to a wrung-out rag. Tadashi squeezes the tree and, like wringing a wet cloth, water comes out, and he reacts in amazement, unable to believe his eyes. And God says he understood what could have surprised him. The boy cannot believe it is a blessing because it looks like magic, and he pictures simply squeezing a tree, but the old man tells him not to judge everything by the rules of his world because this place belongs to the gods and their blessings. He explains that a blessing is not magic but part of God's own power, and that God's power is boundless. Now he has received a share of that power and must remember it. Looking at his hand, the boy thinks the blessing of the 7 stars from the god of agriculture is truly amazing. The old man suggests starting a fire. The hero apologizes and asks how to start one. God tells him not to worry. Take dry grass and spread it out. The boy follows the instructions and asks if he did it right. The old man says yes and advises taking 2 stones and striking a spark. The young man obeys and finally gets a spark, then a flame. God tells him to put the fire on the wood. He does this, and soon a bonfire is burning before them. Tadashi asks if the fire looks good to him. The god of farming laughs and says that after all the work he enjoyed starting the fire with his own hands the most, and that the boy is amusing. The hero adds that this is the very night fire he has always dreamed of. The old man agrees, saying sometimes nothing beats sitting by the fire and talking with someone nearby. They sit and talk all night. Watching the stars and listening to the sounds of nature, the hero feels nostalgic, since in his past life he only dreamed of what their ancestors once had. At dawn, Tadashi grows pensive. The god of agriculture asks him what happened. He says he was thinking about the future and decided he had to build a house, get a pot to boil water, and many other things. God reminds him that he found clay yesterday. Remembering it, the hero admits he had completely forgotten. Mixing it with sand to strengthen it, he achieves surprisingly good results, though he had been very poor at this before. He suspects the blessing of the god of smithing helped him. The old man asks what the beautiful object in his hands is. The boy explains it is Digimon pottery made by his ancestors and the god of agriculture. Surprised, says it is interesting and looks exceptionally beautiful. The hero sees there is nothing left but to burn her in the fire and notices the clay turning black, while the old man laughs and nods nearby. He says everything is happening exactly as he explained. The boy asks in surprise what it's about, his voice filled with confusion. The old man explains that if you do everything too fast, the ware will crack. But with the smith god's blessing, everything turns out perfectly, and the boy decides to keep polishing the pieces to make them more beautiful and protect them from moisture. They keep shaping pottery, and the protagonist says he has not felt this much joy from work in a long time, because his life used to be nothing but routine from morning to night. The boy admits he's hungry and says it's time to cook, and God reminds him that yesterday he caught a fish while fetching water. Tadashi tells them to wait and asks whether it is even edible, and God says it is a demon salmon that is edible though very hard to catch, warning that if it is cooked wrong it becomes poisonous, and the boy asks again in shock. The god of agriculture reassures him that everything is fine because the moment he touched the fish, it was cleansed of all poison, and the hero, surprised, asks if that is true. God jokes that if he doesn't like something, he can leave the fish and take up martial arts. The boy refuses outright and insists he only wants to be a simple farmer and nothing more. The old man laughs and tells him to remember that even after cleansing, some creatures remain hostile. Those are exactly the kinds that live in the surrounding woods. God reassures him that he will stay nearby that night, but tells him to find shelter or build a house. And at that moment, the young man suddenly notices something and, stammering, asks what it is, while the old man replies that it is only a demonic bird and tells him not to worry. The young man says he needs a weapon, and God is surprised since the man already has tools. But the young man explains that demonic wood and ore are stronger than steel, so any tool made from them would be better than a sword. Grandfather reminds him he is a hero and the bearer of a blessing, which makes him stronger than anyone in the world. The boy answers hesitantly. Still, he decides to prepare. The old man encourages and asks whether he remembers Alicia's herb, telling him it can be brewed into a healing drink. The farming god emphasizes preparing ahead, because that way he can save not only himself, but dozens of others in the future. The boy thinks it over, but the old man waves it off and tells him not to worry about it. They continue cooking. First, the man slices the salmon, then drops the pieces into boiling water and adds a few mushrooms. A young man finds the smell appetizing. After tasting, he realizes the dish is good but needs miso, some sauce, or at least salt. God suggests adding a bit of Alicia's herb. Tadashi asks if he can. He adds it to the dish and notices the flavor gets even better. The old man says it is essentially an ingredient of the elixir of life, but it also works well as a seasoning. While the soup cooks, the old man says that even as God, he can accept food as an offering. The boy, surprised, asks what he would want as a sacrifice. God says he dreamed of a stone statue but will settle for this for now. Once the dish is ready, the old man wishes the boy a good meal and asks his opinion. God replies that the food is exceptionally tasty, and that he has not tasted anything like it in a long time, and Tadashi is glad the dish pleased him. The god of agriculture says he would even invite that green-eyed boy to such a dinner and admits it's a bit cheeky, but he would really like to get a statue. The hero guesses it's Vulcan, and the old man confirms, saying Vulcan makes the best tools in the world. The god of the forge appears out of nowhere. Vulcan says he does not need much persuading. Kronos offers a bowl of soup and asks him to taste it. Vulcan sees it is fish soup. Tadashi calls him Mr. Vulcan while he tastes the dish and asks if he likes it, and he replies that it is very good. Kronos says that now that he has eaten, it is time to work, and Vulcan, surprised, asks what that means but agrees to put off the pleasure. The god of agriculture nods and tells him to eat, but listens to him carefully. He tosses an object into his hands and asks if he recognizes it. Vulcan says it is demonic ore. Kronos asks whether he can handle her and says that what is impossible for ordinary people is possible for the god of smithing with his power. Vulcan wonders where the divine power came from. The old man, stunned, says he has never heard of a mortal creating anything from it and demands to know the secret. The smithing god says it's all because mortals think too narrowly, and he tells the hero they need tools, a furnace, an anvil, a hammer, and tongs for hot metal. Tadashi asks them to speak more slowly. God says they'll start with something simple, the furnaces, and adds that molds for melting and a place for the material would be useful, but this will do. The hero finishes building the furnace and says it's ready. Vulcan orders them to stoke it and add air and wood until the temperature peaks. The god of the forge praises him and says only keeping the fire alive remains. Tadashi says the demonic trees do not burn. The god replies that with effort they can be lit, but few are willing to try. The boy says the fire still won't catch. The volcano smiles and tells him to wait and watch closely. Gradually, the flames spread over the branches, and the volcano explains that the fire's color changes from red to blue. Tadashi concludes a higher temperature is needed to ignite it, and suggests the same applies to demonic ore. The smithing god praises him, saying he understood immediately, and adds that Mia does not realize this and tries to steal items made from that material. Vulcan says that since he understands everything, it's time to act, and he promises to stay nearby and help if needed, and the boy thanks him. Tadashi starts working, shapes the stone, and the ore begins to glow blue, while he thinks he is doing everything right. The god of smithing speaks to him. The boy flinches and answers hesitantly, but the god praises him, saying the blue aura means the ore can be worked, and that he has never had a better student, and the boy thanks him. Unsure what to do next, the hero asks Vulcan, who advises making a plate first and then trying to forge a hammer or another tool. The boy believes that even if it fails, he'll at least know which direction to go next. Vulcan says everything is fine, and that when the piece is finished, it should be quenched in water. which will produce a blue ore that is extremely strong and ideal for making fine tools, and Vulcan praises the boy, calling it a great start. The main character holds the finished tool and says his hammer is finally done. Admitting it looks a bit rough, he says it will do the job and get better with time. The god of smithing praises him and says practice will only make it better. The young man promises to work harder and asks to be taught. Vulcan agrees, advises mining more ore next time and building a better forge, and asks if the hero can work with clay. The boy shows clay pots and is surprised God didn't notice them. Tadashi explains he fired them at high heat so they became ceramics. Vulcan says they should improve quality and suggests building a kiln for firing. The hero says he will welcome any help. God agrees, since there is nowhere to retreat. They begin to work together. Their speed is impressive, and any ordinary person would envy them. Together they achieve the desired result. Later, the boy falls asleep from exhaustion. Beside him, Vulcan says he has finally rested, and that even the bearer of the blessing needs sleep. Vulcan lets him sleep because he had worked 2 days in a row. The god of agriculture says, Tadashi's abilities have been well developed. Volcano agrees and adds that a seed planted in fertile soil and carefully tended will sprout and later bear abundant fruit. Another god asks if he truly believes the young man will flourish. Kronos answers, there is no guarantee. From the days they spent together, he only realized the young man is not the sort to risk his life. Volcano realizes that even if he doesn't save the world, he can at least make it a little better. The god of farming believes the place where the young man ended up is nothing more than an abandoned prison of the world Avesta. He believes that as long as Tadashi is here, he can change everything, not just for the locals, but even for the gods themselves, and he must at least try while they only watch. The god of smithing hesitates, but finally agrees. And both gods turn to see the boy awake, one calling out that Tadashi has at last opened his eyes and addressing him. They say his training is complete, and now it's time to leave him be. Tadashi thanks them. Vulcan adds he hasn't had such a capable student in a long time. He asks to be contacted if problems occur, but jokes that he will not work for free and will demand a good sacrifice. Everyone laughs. The young man says it's fine and they can count on him. Kronos reminds Tadashi that he must first get his own life in order before thinking about sacrifices. Tadashi agrees and thanks him for the advice. Meanwhile, Vulcan urges Kronos to set off. The old man says he'll miss the boy, but that's the rule, and asks him to take care of himself. Tadashi agrees and thanks him again for the help. The gods rise into the air. Kronos calls out that they will meet again. The boy watches them go and says it will certainly happen. Looking at the sunrise, he decides it is time to gather the first harvest. This was the start of his new life in this world. After the third harvest, the field had changed, and the cypresses and chestnuts he had planted began to look like a small forest. He built a small house, a grain store, and a little cellar, enough for the peaceful life he dreamed of, but he admits he has felt lonely recently. He thinks this can be seen as a flaw of life on the edge of the world, and he increasingly wants a pet. But he wonders where to find one in such a remote place. Screams suddenly reach him. He wonders what they are. Not wanting to get involved, he decides to look because he can always run if it is trouble. He moves toward the sounds and suddenly sees a strange scene. A small puppy is running for its life from a monster. The boy knows doing nothing will end in tragedy. Torn between saving others and fleeing, he hesitates. He suddenly remembers the god of farming's words that he is now very strong, gathers his resolve, takes the tool from his bag, and believes he is blessed and must act. Calling for the monster to back off, he drives a crowbar into the ground. The boy wonders if it will work. The monster turns its head toward him. He lunges after the puppy again and calls it too bold. A plan is already forming because a frontal attack won't work. If it can fly, it can be shot down. The hero swings his hoe and throws a clump of dirt at the monster while shouting, "Take that!" The monster roars in outrage, and the hero asks if it wants more and orders it to climb up. Tadashi throws dirt at his opponent again, shouting that there's plenty of it here and nothing to be ashamed of, and warns that if the man tries to get in here again, he'll bury him on the spot. A young man shouts after the bird so it won't come back, calling it an overgrown rooster, while a frightened puppy trembles in his arms, and he looks at its body with pity, seeing terrible wounds. The hero examines the animal's wound, asks it to be patient, and rummages through his bag. He pulls out a healing herb, bandages the wound believing it will help, and then gently strokes the puppy's head. The boy asks where he came from and where his parents are, guessing he got lost or ran from a monster. Tadashi notices the puppy reaching for a bone and, smiling, asks whether the puppy wants it. The small animal greedily gnaws a bone. Alarmed, the boy shouts, thinking the puppy will break all its teeth if it keeps eating that way. He takes food from his bag and offers it, gently telling the puppy to eat properly. Smiling, the hero thinks the animal is incredibly cute. Unknown to him, it looks a lot like a dog. Tadashi asks if it wants to go with him, since they cannot stay here. The puppy responds happily. The guy picks up the puppy and says they will live together now, then remembers the puppy needs a name and looks at him with curiosity. An idea comes to him. Because of the strange sounds the baby makes, he decides to call him Kuru from now on. The boy is relieved to no longer be alone. Lying in bed, the hero watches the forest slowly spread, the fields widen, and several types of edible crops are already growing, but he worries the season is ending and he hasn't managed to do much. Looking out the window, he decides to go scout what's ahead. He steps outside and begins packing his things. Looking over what they've gathered, he says he doesn't know what lies ahead but must be ready for anything. Then turns to Kuru, who already looks older, and notes how fast he has grown. Tadashi considers whether this is normal for him, but concludes it is probably a special subspecies of dogs in this world. He tells Kuru they are heading out on a short trip. The dog barks like it is asking where. The boy points to the horizon and says they are going to the sea to fetch salt. He does not know how many days it will take, but there is nothing else to do for now. The boy asks if Kuru can see where he is pointing. Kuru barks happily, as if inviting him to climb onto his back. Tadashi declines in surprise, saying he can walk on his own. The beast insists and forces him to sit. The boy cries out in surprise, and Kuru starts running. They rush forward, and Tadashi is amazed that his friend runs as fast as a car. The beast roars happily. They reach the sea quickly. A majestic view opens up before them, and the boy says he would have walked for many days, and thanks Kuru sincerely for the journey. The sea in this world looks strangely like Earth's. At first, he does not notice the water is dark. Thinking he can clean it, he touches the water and it clears. He cries out in delight. Tasting the water, he finds it salty, like in his world, and decides the worlds have more in common than they seem. So he starts mining salt and thinks this is the right plan. Believing that boiling salty water and letting it evaporate will leave salt behind, the boy starts boiling the water, imagining he is making salt. Then a beast appears nearby and asks what happened. Noticing the seafood, the hero gasps with delight. The beast beckons him to follow. The boy hesitates but goes. Kuru leads him to the water, and Tadashi says excitedly that it's an incredibly large lake. Then the pleased Kuru brings him a lobster in its mouth. The hero stares at Kuru in disbelief, amazed that such creatures exist in this world. At first, he cannot believe it because this is another world, but he quickly drops his doubts and says he does not care as long as there are lobsters here. A lavish seafood platter appears on the table. Tadashi breaks off a piece and offers it to Kuru to taste. Tasting it, he finds it extremely tasty, with an immediate salty note that's natural for sea creatures. He repeats to himself that it's simply a treat. Kuru gets upset when the food runs out. The hero calms him and promises to make more, so there is no need to worry. But a ship's silhouette appears behind the hero. The boy thinks Kuru has been drinking a lot, figures it's the salty food, and gives him some water. Turning around, he notices Kuru in a different place and wonders who is drinking the water. Turning around, he sees a girl and cries out in fright. The girl with cat ears says the water has run out. He stands in shock, unable to gather his thoughts, and wonders if she is really a girl. He notices her ears, remembers seeing ones like them only in his fantasies, and considers where she came from and whether this points to global water problems. The girl calls him Sir and asks for water and food. He asks her to wait, quietly surprised to be called a gentleman. With tears in her eyes, a girl hugs the bewildered hero. Then other girls rush up to him, and one tells him to let Aaron go while addressing him as a human, leaving the boy confused by what is happening. First a girl with cat ears, and now an elf too. He concludes they probably came from that ship. So focused on the seafood, he didn't even notice. The boy finds it odd that the girl is in a swimsuit. Since elves are supposed to live in forests, he cannot understand what is happening. The other girl asks if he heard her, and then shouts louder for him to take his hands off Eren, while the hero asks her to let him go, saying he does not like it either. Other girls shout for him to release her immediately because it is unthinkable for a man to touch Eren. The rabbit-eared girl again calls him master and asks for food, but Tadashi insists she stop calling him that. She happily tells Iselina he is a good person, but the elf distrustfully tells her to stay away from him. The elf warns that people are treacherous and might poison the food, and the boy says he himself just got it and ate it. Iselina, surprised, asks whether this marks the edge of human lands, and Tadashi honestly does not understand which border she means. Curious about where they landed, she asks, and he replies that the gods called it the edge of the world, which impresses her even more. The elf says the water here should be black and poisonous, and explains he purified it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gotten salt or seafood. Iselina refuses to believe him and calls him a liar, but he insists he is telling the truth even if they refuse to believe him. A girl with cat ears offers everyone a taste and says there is clean water, while the elf looks on in surprise. Eren pleads because the ship has no food or water, and admits that if not for this man, she would have died long ago. Tadashi offers to share his provisions, but the elven woman refuses, saying humans can no longer be trusted. She turns her gaze to Kurur and asks what kind of magical beast it is, and why it is so huge, but the boy does not understand her. He says it's just a dog, maybe a wolf, and is surprised by such a reaction, while the girl shouts that animals that big do not exist. The elven woman shouts that his fangs can bite through even dragon scales and calls him the legendary Fenrir. Fear makes her faint. Her friends support her and call her name Iselena, and Tadashi, confused, tries to bring her around. She grabs him, pushes him away sharply, and shouts that he's a human being, and he asks her to stop humiliating him like that. He explains that he saved them from starvation, offers her a chance to rest and regain her strength, and hands her a cup of water. The girl is surprised to hear it is a brew of the Elysia herb, and asks where he got such a rare plant. She remembers she has the blessing of the healing goddess, so she immediately realizes the boy is not lying, and that it really is Elysia's herb. Realizing how hard it is to find her in the world, she starts to believe he really is a good person and accepts the drink. Her strength returns quickly. She gets up, and Tadashi calms her, saying she should walk a little. Surprised, the girl notices she is lying on the grass even though she had been on the beach, and he says he moved her so she would be more comfortable. She asks with suspicion about growing Elysia here, but inside she becomes increasingly impressed by the man and his strength. While Tadashi strokes Kurura, the girl notices the glow of the 9-star blessing on his hand. Realizing he holds the highest blessing, she decides not to oppose him and apologizes for her harshness. She then introduces herself as the head of the clan of sea elves and the representative of the Flounder Archipelago, Iselina Ariadna. Tadashi says he heard of her as the archipelago's queen, but she modestly replies it was long ago and now she is only the leader of the elves. He suddenly remembers he hasn't given his name and introduces himself as Ono Tadashi. She, surprised, asks whether he really is the king. He quickly objects, saying Tadashi is just his first name and Ono is the surname she heard wrong. The elven woman says that if a person has a surname, his lineage is known and suggests he might be a knight, a hero, or a sage, but he calmly denies being an ordinary farmer. Impressed by his words, Eren says the man is kind because he even has 7-star blessings from the god of farming and can grow everything incredibly fast. The elf sternly scolds her for being careless, but Eren insists that without his help, they would have long since starved. She offers Iselini some seafood and urges her to try it. The elf takes it with cool indifference, and the main character watches their behavior in surprise. After tasting it, she says grimly she should have made him check the food for poison first, then admits she still needs to regain her strength. Surprised by her words, the hero realizes that this world has strict customs for testing food he did not know about. With a furrowed brow, she still finishes her food. The boy smiles as he hears a thank you meant for him. Both he and the cat-eared girl are stunned when the elf suddenly kneels and asks to be his servant. Her words keep ringing in the hero's head, and he feels the heavy stares of others. Confusion and an inability to grasp the meaning of such gratitude tear at his soul. He hurriedly says not to take it seriously and insists he would never make a girl his slave. The elf replies sadly that someone must sacrifice themselves, and she volunteers to be that person. Irene objects, arguing that as their leader she must become the servant. Iselina shouts for her to stop, reminding her that Irene is the beast people's hero and their last hope. The boy wonders why gratitude is shown through slavery. They get confused when answering, saying people always take them into captivity and now fear anything different. The hero, puzzled, asks what they actually think of him. The elven woman speaks coldly, suggesting he might want a beautiful maid, and his imagination paints absurd scenes, so he awkwardly insists he never wanted that. He adds that he has lived on his own his whole life and needs no servants except Kururu, the elf repeats in surprise, and the other girl asks why he helped. The guy shrugs and says he just helps people in need, adding that this is what people do here, while the girls only shake their heads. A deeper sense of oddness fills him, and he suspects something is wrong with these people. Then he remembers he is in the Flater archipelago among elves and beast folk. Iselina admits they were captured by a military duchy of people from the Eastern Sea, and the boy, surprised, asks if they obey them. She says they were repeatedly destroyed by demons from the Northern Sea who devoured her companions, and the memory breaks the hero's heart. She adds that the sea elves and beast folk have always been weak peoples who stayed on the borders. Now the archipelago is torn between demons and humans. Irene says only girls are left alive because the men vanished in the war or fell prey to demons. Iselina says the demons see them only as food, and the human duchy is a bit better, but its demands are unbearable. Irene says she was ordered to fill 7 treasuries with gold, or she will be made a slave. The young man remembers God's words and realizes these demands are exactly what Cronus warned about. They say they sailed away to escape slavery and search for food. The hero clenches his fists, thinking the world is too cruel. He turns to Iselina, offers to share his food, and asks whether they eat everything. She replies, yes, amazed, and the food he shakes from his sack draws surprised looks. The hero says it's enough to start and is willing to give more. Aaron, pleased, thanks him and calls him Sir again. The hero reminds Aaron he asked not to be addressed that way. A girl behind him hesitates, then asks if he has any more of the rare herb he gave to Alicia, and Tadashi smiles and says there is a whole field so she can go pick some. Shocked, she studies the plant and asks whether he really grew it himself. Iselina angrily says it is impossible because the plant is rare and very finicky. The girl with the ears stops her, reminding her that Tadashi has 7 stars of the farming blessing, so it is easy for him. Iselina blushes, admitting the truth. She says there are many wounded on the island and is surprised by his generosity. The young man replies calmly that they only have to say how much they need and he will give it. The elven woman offers sincere thanks and apologizes for not revealing sooner that she carries the healing goddess's blessing. She can brew an elixir from an herb that is stronger than the plant itself, and the hero is amazed and calls it impressive. Immediately, the young woman offers to show her skill, takes a healing herb, crushes it, boils water, and pours everything into a glass jar. She lifts the jar, summons a glow, and prays to the healing goddess Alicia, begging for the power to heal. The protagonist is astonished. An elixir forms, and she says it is a small price and tells him to treat it as payment for her help. Tadashi agrees and accepts it. He admits he has never seen such beautiful glass, and Iselina, disappointed she did not get feedback on her skill, asks if that is all while Tadashi apologizes and praises her talent. She explains that glass is made from ordinary sand, so he can make it too, and then calls another girl, Asya. Asya steps forward and, addressing Mrs. Iselina, answers obediently that she is ready to serve, her eyes shining with excitement. The protagonist notices the girl's glasses and realizes people in this world can make lenses. An elven woman explains that Asya makes the glass and vials and has a single-star blessing from the smithing god, and that elves can make glass and have secret knowledge they are ready to share with him. Delighted, the protagonist asks her to teach him because he also wants to learn to make that kind of glass, and the girl, a little embarrassed, agrees and says she will show him everything. He points out right away that even with a sea of sand under their feet, they have no kiln or tools, and Tadashi says he will take care of everything now. Pulling out his bag, He pours out the materials and asks what they need. Glad Kronos gave him such a sack as the elf women watch, impressed. Asya starts explaining the process, and they set to work. Iselina watches him make bricks and asks her friend how that is possible. Her friend suggests he has the blessing of the god of smithing, which speeds the process. The girl is surprised that several gods blessed him. Seeing that Asya understands this better, she trusts her words. Finally, the hero finishes the stove and considers what to do next, including portable versions. Asya scoops up a handful of sand and explains that good glass needs pure sand. Sea sand has many shells, so seaweed is needed. Iselina suggests taking the seaweed on the ship. The hero thanks Iselina and agrees. Once on board, he suddenly spots something and looks at that spot in surprise. He asks the girls whether Undaria is feathery, and Iselina wonders where he learned about these seaweeds. The main character confirms his world had an ocean too. He does not know how much glass is needed here, but will save some seaweed for soup. The girl looks surprised and asks whether he really eats them, since everyone else always threw them away. He says they are quite tasty, though they have a distinctive flavor not everyone likes. Iselina reflects and admits that he would look good among the sea people. She blushes slightly and smiles. The hero jokes to himself that the local seaweed could be called Japanese. He notices sea cotton and sea gum seeds, examines them, and wonders how they differ from ordinary ones. She explains they sew their clothes from sea cotton and rubber and points to her outfit. He blushes, says he understands and they should grow those plants, then asks her to show him how, and she agrees. She warns that growing it may take a year or more. The hero says excitedly that it is interesting and offers to show his method. They kneel together by the water. Tadashi throws a seed into the water. Iselina thinks nothing will happen since he had just planted it. Then a small tree sprouts and she gasps in surprise. The hero remembers he can also fertilize it. She praises his cleverness because the sapling can be used as fertilizer, and he suggests testing it by sprinkling plant food on it. The girl can hardly believe her eyes, amazed at how fast the tree is growing. The protagonist thinks these giant trees will now grow right on the beach. That will be enough for glass. He turns to Iselina, and she answers. He reminds her she promised to do whatever it takes to repay him for his help and food. Frightened, she says she will do anything she can. He understands this world needs neither warriors nor healers, only people who can feed others. And if so, Tadashi is ready to give up his goals. Claiming to be a simple farmer who knows nothing about this world, he offers a deal. The girl asks again, slightly surprised. He stands by his words and explains that as a farmer he needs plants, seeds, and knowledge, and in return he will provide food and grass for Alicia to help make the island and its people happier. The girl agrees, gives a gentle smile and blushes a little. Iselina says they will return to their island tomorrow morning, but she will grant his request. The main character asks again, startled. Suddenly he notices it's already evening. The girl looks at him in astonishment and asks why he has changed so much. He admits he was too exhausted and forgot to make his bed. The materials were used for the stove and tools. He becomes irritated, but she gently calms him. Iselina reassures him and opens the tents, and when one is ready, the hero, stunned, asks if they had been with them the whole time. He thanks them, and the girls smile. Kuru runs to him, and the hero praises the animal for a good day. Noticing it covered in sand, he leads it to the water. Kuru growls happily and jumps into the waves. After bathing, Kuru becomes fluffy and pretty. The hero can't help but notice the girls bathing and blushes, unsure how to bathe himself. Smiling, Iselina approaches and invites him to spend the night in her tent. The hero blushes, declines, and says he would rather stay by the fire. Iselina and Asya drag him inside, refusing to let him sleep outside. He looks at the spacious tent, surprised, and hesitantly admits it is a bad idea. He agrees at last, but the girl with the ears calls out cheerfully that Mr. Tadashi will sleep with them. The hero blushes, refuses, heads to the campfire, and Aaron just smiles. Kururu appears suddenly. The hero sighs and says the beast has convinced him, so they stay together in the tent and the night passes quietly. At dawn, the heroes step outside and are met by cheerful Aaron, who asks if he is woken up. He smiles, noting that she also got up early. She asks if he will work, since he had a chance to rest. When he does not understand which chance she means, the girl pulls back the tent flap. They spot Iselina sleeping peacefully. Aaron jokes that she had promised to do anything for him. The hero, embarrassed, asks what is wrong with her. The girl laughs and says Iselina is not his type. The hero replies that he likes her but won't take advantage of that. Changing the subject, he asks how the tent fabric stays on, and the girl laughs at the silly question, saying it is glued on, of course. The hero realizes that, as in his world, glue is made from animal bones. Asiya greets everyone and offers to show how tents are made. She explains that the elasticity comes from sea rubber, and the frame is made from different kinds of wood. The hero acknowledges the elves' cleverness and nods in admiration. Aaron asks whether he really enjoys that kind of craft. He replies happily that he has dreamed of it his whole life, then asks what she enjoys. Pausing and hesitating, she finally says that as a warrior, she loves battle. Proudly, she adds that she once even killed a shark. The hero looks at her skeptically. He admits he didn't expect that reply. An elf approaches them. The hero says good morning to Iselina and offers her water. Awkwardly, she says she rarely lets herself look sleepy around other people. The hero realizes he was wrong and sees that she really is a princess. Iselina says they are leaving for the island and will be home by tomorrow because the wind is favorable. The hero asks for food for her people to be brought sooner. Assuring her it is a deal, he says she does not need to thank him again. She looks at him admiringly, blushes, and thanks him once more. The hero understands Kronos' words. Divine power is not given in vain and must be proven by helping others. Iselina leaves Asiya and 2 other girls with him and asks him to look after them. He agrees. She boards the ship, and he wishes them a safe journey. The hero turns to the girls and asks them to introduce themselves and describe their skills so each can be assigned a task. One says her name is Lola and that she is skilled at crafts. The second introduces herself as Barry and adds that she worked in the fields. The hero nods, relying on both of them and on Asiya, and asks them to change clothes because working in swimsuits is too revealing for him. The girls are surprised that all the female elves wear swimsuits. Lola says it is the most practical outfit for working on the beach. The hero explains they now have different tasks and he will give them new clothes. Working with exposed skin is dangerous. The girls agree. Asiya asks where to start and suggests they could make glass. The hero pauses and says they will grow a forest first. The girls are surprised and ask again, and a beautiful seascape unfolds before them. Barry is stunned that the trees really grow only by watering. The hero says he wasn't joking and thinks he will plow the land while Barry handles planting and watering. He concludes that if everything goes according to his instructions, anyone could grow anything on his land. The preparations for the forest feel complete to him. The girls ask, curious, what happened. He stops and says he wants to dig a well here. Bari assures him she can handle it herself because she already did it on the island. The hero refuses, saying he can handle it himself and is convinced this spot holds what he is looking for. The girl looks lost. He drives his tool into the ground. Barry gasps in surprise. The hero smiles, says he guessed right, and asks him to step back. A sudden rush of water bursts from the impact point. Barry cries out in surprise. Tadashi explains he smelled fresh groundwater, so he struck that spot. Relieved, he says it's good everything worked out quickly, and they didn't have to dig a hole. She agrees and admits she didn't understand everything. She insists he leave the well work to her because helping is her duty. The hero agrees, says the materials are ready, and points to the spot. Although it's still early, he decides to prepare lunch. Asiya asks Lola to help him cook. Lola gladly agrees. They head to Kururu, who is pleased to show a big catch. Tadashi praises him for a good job. He tastes for salt and thinks it turned out great. Lola asks what she should do. The hero asks for a moment, then tells her to bring the seaweed Iselina left. He will make the broth while she soaks the seaweed in a large cauldron. Lola smiles and says she understands. She walks quickly. Smiling, the hero thinks he still has time before lunch so he can work without rushing. Lola calls out to him and says the broth is almost ready. Her face shines with joy. Smiling, she notices Tadashi's table and leans over to ask if he is making bread. The hero, surprised, admits she guessed correctly. He had heard that bread and cookies could be made from the shafakoran root. so he decided to try. Lola smiles and says she's baked bread before and can take care of it. The hero smiles back but says he wants to learn too, so it's better to do it together. Lola agrees gladly. She starts kneading the dough, sets a piece on the table and explains that the fruits are good for baking but should be mixed with flour. And the hero listens closely and says they will need to ask Zelina to bring more. Lola tells him not to worry and that she will do it herself, adding that salt makes the dough firmer. The hero agrees, admitting his only skill is salt and that he makes it perfectly. Together they put the dough into the oven and wait for the bread. When the bread is ready, they take it out. The hero thinks it does not look like bread from his world. After breaking off a piece, he assumes it is supposed to be that way. Now it's time for the seafood soup. He removes the seaweed before it boils, adds Kururu's catch, and says the dish will turn out well. When lunch is ready, all three girls are impressed. One of them tastes it and says it is tasty. Asuya says she never expected Tadashi could cook seaweed and will eat it with him now, and suggests he might also be from the CL clan. Lola smiles and says she does not see him as a stranger. The hero says he is glad to hear that, and asks Kururu if the bread tastes good because the shea fruit made it so tasty, and Kururu gives a satisfied growl. The hero thanks three girls for their work today, offers them coffee made from the local fruit, and Asuya, curious, says they have never had such a drink and asks what it is. One of the girls tries it and says it's too bitter. Lola apologizes and suggests they drink some water instead. The hero looks confused and says he should apologize then. He thinks the taste is very similar to the coffee from his world and cannot figure out where he went wrong. Asuya smiles and says she likes it and that he made excellent coffee. The hero admits with relief that he is glad to hear that. She asks him not to worry. He laughs and says he'll teach her to make better glass today. She says awkwardly that it's the only thing she can do to help. Asuya and Tatas work in the workshop and finally get a glass bottle. The hero proudly says the job is done while holding the finished piece in his hands, and the girl calls it beautiful. She adds that he even built a glass blowing device. Laughing, he says he just had a good female teacher. Thinking of the gods, he hopes Vulcan and the others are alive and well, and he thinks he will have to treat them to seafood someday. The girl says his wood burns perfectly, and with his techniques, they can make glass of the highest quality. Asuya tells Tadashi that if they have more glass, they will be able to make many small bottles for elixirs. Tadashi replies that she understood correctly, and asks them to make as many bottles as possible. The hero suggests she also make glassware because it looks better and is much stronger than ceramics, and the girl agrees without hesitation. Tadashi thinks they need a lot of elixir, so it's time to expand the Ellis grass fields, and since they need vegetables to eat, they should start another vegetable plot. Tadashi turns to Bari for help, explaining they must get an important task done before sunset. Bari agrees willingly and offers no objections. The hero reflects that although there is a lot of work, he likes living this way because he makes his tools and dishes from what he can get with his own hands. Tadashi realizes this is exactly how he dreamed of living, and suddenly Barry asks if they need to harvest cotton and rubber today. She immediately adds that she will follow them. Lola explains to the hero that if he wants thread and cloth, he will have to make a spinning wheel and a loom, and that is not simple. The girl says she and Asuya are willing to try and make everything needed. Tadashi agrees and adds that he will then make the sewing needles. The hero decides to use cotton to make threads and fabrics because its quality and strength far exceed any substitutes. Tadashi admits he usually does not think about things like this, but this time he wants to sew the girls some nice outfits so they can save on swimsuits. Barry suddenly spots something and calls to Tadashi. Everyone sees a ship approaching them. The hero recognizes Aislane and her companions and is glad they are safe. More ships appear behind the first, leaving Tadashi stunned, because he hadn't expected to see so many at once. Ships dock at the shore, elves disembark and start unloading, and a girl named Erin runs to Tadashi calling him sir, and he angrily reminds her he already asked her not to call him that. She just sticks her tongue out playfully and says she knows nothing. Aislane comes up and tells Tadashi they're back. She adds that they brought the harvest with them and asks him to inspect it. The hero is stunned. Tadashi was sure Aislane and the others would bring only seeds, but eventually admitted that finished products were far more useful and necessary. Inspecting the food baskets, He says barley and hops will be useful for brewing and plans to use sugarcane and palm nuts to make sugar and oil. The hero finds wheat and soybeans among the harvest, thanks Eastline for bringing the food, and explains they tried to grow them on the island but nothing grew. She apologizes that their island is not suitable for some crops, but the hero interrupts and says what they brought is more than enough, even more than he expected. Eastline says they sent nearly everyone here to help the hero with the fields. About 150 people arrived in total. She adds that they brought a few tools needed to make the fabrics. The hero sincerely thanks the elf for bringing them. Eastline says proudly that the hero had no reason to doubt her, since she ran an entire country and had everything planned down to the smallest detail. Tadashi now believes he must create the fields, but suddenly Izarane turns to Asia and asks if any of them had been intimate with Tadashi, and the hero freezes in surprise when he hears it. Embarrassed, Asiya blushes and says none of them even thought of anything like that, and the girl replies she would not be offended because he is a strong, remarkable man, so wanting to be close to him is natural. Surprised, Tadashi wonders if the girl realizes he can hear everything. Then he thinks of a question for Eastline. He asks why there are so many people here, and says he does not mind, but it still feels a bit odd to him. Eastline explains that all these elves will help build the village, though there might not be enough of them. The protagonist asks again in surprise. The girl says the village can only be built with Tadashi's permission. Tadashi replies that he does not mind living here, but he originally came only to stock up on food. He asks again whether she really plans to build a fishing village to harvest seafood. The girl objects, saying she intends to build a full settlement here and is glad the hero created this forest for them. Unexpectedly, she asks if they can start clearing the forest and building the settlement now, and the protagonist freezes in shock, not expecting such a turn. He explains that cut wood cannot be used right away, it must dry, and reproaches the girl, reminding her she already knows this well. Tadashi says he can dry the wood in 3 days if he really tries, since using his power he can squeeze the moisture out much faster. She said she did not expect immediate results from him, but since Kronos, the god of farming, had blessed him, she believed he would find a way to do it right away. Eastline admits she expected the wood to be ready when they returned, so they brought carpentry tools to start work right away. She realized then that even the strongest have limits. The hero calls to her in surprise, and Eastline stops to say she wants to build a kingdom under Tadashi's leadership. She says she dreams of him becoming a king who will rule these lands wisely, but the boy replies, confused, that he does not understand what she means. He asks whether she is overstating his merits, and she confirms, stressing that he was blessed not just by Kronos, but also by other higher powers. Izarane notes that even though the hero downplays his achievements, everyone knows it was a prison, and he turned those lands into fertile soil, while Tadashi stubbornly calls it only a gift from the gods. He asks if they do not already have a kingdom where they can live freely, and why Izarane insists on creating a new one. The girl talks about freedom, acknowledges he is right, but points out he has no idea what awaits them beyond this place. She calls someone named Liza. The hero watches in surprise as an elf missing her right hand appears and asks what happened to her. Izarane explains that Liza served her family for many years. She explains that the girl's parents were devoured by monsters from the demon lord's army, and Lisa lost an arm while escaping them. Izarane gives the warrior an elixir, and she drinks it obediently while the hero watches in surprise. Before his eyes, Liza's right hand begins to regrow, and he is stunned because, though he had heard of the potion's power, he did not believe it could restore lost limbs. Restored, the girl bows deeply to Tadashi and thanks him, saying she can now serve Izarane loyally and without fear. Izarane explains that despite her care and blessings, the island has no medicine and not enough food. Unable to rule or defend her people alone, she gave up the throne. Tadashi listens with sadness in his heart. The girl says she only knows how to make elixirs, but even those do not cure everything. The hero asks whether she will restore her power if he provides the materials and food. She denies it, saying the potion is strong only because it was made from the herb Tadashi grew himself. She says that everyone, from Liza to the weakest, is alive only because of the herbs the hero provided, and that without him they would have died long ago. Izarane then hands him the crown and explains that the first king of the elves, Evolus, was once a tree that later changed form, and this crown proves his heritage. She declares that all the elves want Tadashi as their king, but the young man refuses, saying he cannot accept such an honor. Calming him, the girl explains that some will not leave the island, but others need a ray of hope only he can offer, because she could not do it herself. The hero asks doubtfully whether she really believes he can do this. Izurin confirms and says the rulers are called apostles of the gods, and Tadashi is the most worthy among them. The boy thinks a blessing is only a sign of power, and the girl goes on to say that none of those called king deserve the title, including herself. Eren looks at Aishlin with sadness and confusion, and she insists Tadashi is different, for he has a good heart and strength greater than anyone's, and he must become the king who protects the weak. The hero looked at her with regret, but agreed, asking only whether he would have to wear the crown all the time. Her face lit up with joy at his consent. Izurin addresses his people, announcing that he renounces the throne and hands power to Tadashi. Placing the crown on his head, she orders everyone to greet the new king. The crowd cheers, and Tadashi realizes he has no idea what to do with these people now. He remembers his maternal grandfather named him Tadashi because he believed his grandson could make the world better, and now those words feel like destiny to the young man. Tadashi always thought his grandfather was exaggerating because he had been defeated in a past life, but now he realizes he must try again in this world. The hero takes off his crown, saying he no longer needs it, and a girl picks it up and asks where he is heading next. Tadashi replies that he must plow a new field because there are more people and more grass is needed, and the crown does not excuse him from his duties. He says the king must always look after his subjects. The young man's words fill the girl with happiness. The hero realizes that when building a village from scratch, he must plan field placement and future crop productivity from the start. Tadashi tells the elves that from now on they must inform him of all their needs, since Iselin has renounced the throne. Cheerful elves get to work right away. Tadashi admits to Iselin that he didn't expect her to have such hopes. Iselin doesn't understand what he means. The young man waves his hand and asks them to forget his words. And at that moment, Iselin and Draus lead him to the newly built house, where he freezes in surprise, carefully inspecting the building. He admires the glass window and how quickly the elves finished the job. Iselin says they won't be able to work that fast on future builds, but they built this house for Tadashi in record time. The girl urges the hero to praise the carpenters who built the house. The young man looks at the workers, confused. He notes that far more women than men arrived from the island. Tadashi gathers his thoughts and thanks the builders. They beam with joy, and Foreman Spike says it is too soon to be thanking anyone and calls everyone to inspect the house from the inside. The hero is stunned by what he sees. Spike smiles, pleased that the new king likes the interior. Tadashi thinks the boards are finished flawlessly and the nails are driven so skillfully that they are almost invisible. He asks the foreman what they need for the job, and the foreman says they have to save because iron is scarce. The hero says he'll start on the iron as soon as he finishes with the fields and notes that magical iron is much better than ordinary. Spike bows gratefully. Realizing the iron supplies are running out, Tadashi knows he must act quickly, and suddenly his attention falls on a luxurious bed in the room. He cannot understand why it is so enormous. Iselin explains that the bed's size and softness are a sign of royal dignity. The hero says he meant something different. The bed feels oddly large for one person. Iselin reminds him he sleeps alone. Tadashi is genuinely surprised that anyone could forget something so obvious, and he feels awkward because the others are sleeping closely together. Iselin asks who she can find for him. The hero looks puzzled and does not understand what is meant. She says he doesn't seem to like Asha or the others, so she assumes Tadashi prefers slimmer girls. A growing sense of dread grips the young man. He asks Iselin to slow down, but she doesn't see anything wrong and assumes he wants to invite several girls at once. Tadashi sharply objects, accusing her of talking nonsense, but Iselin refuses to agree and insists her words are not nonsense. She tells him that now that he is king, he needs concubines. Tadashi freezes, bewildered. He finally understands what Iselin is hinting at, and Eren appears, saying the hero is wasting his time trying to persuade the former queen to abandon the idea. She says Iselin never wastes time. When the hero asks her to explain what's going on, she tells him not to worry. She explains that elves and beast folk place great value on ties to kings, and that men are now very scarce. The hero replies angrily that there are almost none left. Iselin says that thanks to the hero, her people no longer worry about housing or food, and she is already thinking about having children. The hero asks if they hate people, and Iselin replies that Tadashi is not like the others. She explains that elf blood is usually dominant, so mixed couples more often have elf children, and she tells him not to worry. Tadashi thinks to himself how different his image of elves was. Iselin adds that even if a child is born, the child will be happy in such a family, because families now need to be rebuilt after the losses of war. Convinced they would be best for Tadashi, she advises him to first get close to Eren and then suggests Lisa, but the hero refuses, saying he does not know her at all. Iselin is surprised that the elves believe human men always need a woman. Tadashi agrees and stresses that feelings cannot be ignored. The girl says elves have a mating season and bodies similar to humans, so there should be no problems, adding that intimacy should happen only at a specific point in the cycle. The hero angrily says that Liza, as a royal guard, may sleep beside her, but he will not touch her. Iselin asks what about Eren. Eren jokes that he could stand in line too, and adds that Iselin herself is the best fit for the role. The former queen awkwardly says she's not his type. Eren teases that nothing came of them last time and tells her to be more persistent. Tadashi suddenly realizes it really did happen last time, and can hardly believe it was intentional. Regaining his composure, he starts shouting at Eren and tells her not to call him master. She says she can call him king, but doubts it will change anything, and he agrees, asking why she does not just call him by his name, Iselin. She says Iselin is an exception, and calling him that could hurt his reputation. The hero is surprised, because Eren is a ruler too, but does not insist on being addressed that way. Eren explains that the beast people live in packs with a clear hierarchy, and she feels safer when someone stronger is nearby. Though blessed by the gods, her power did not save her people from war, and she wearily admits she feels the same as Iselin did when she renounced the throne. Eren remembers when she first met the hero and thought she would handle him easily and get better, but those thoughts were misleading. She suddenly comes to her senses, apologizes for her words, and asks him not to pay attention to them. Tadashi cannot believe Eren's fate is so similar to Iselin's. He thinks the girl is still a child, but life's burden is already too heavy for her. The hero tells Eren she doesn't need to apologize and assures her she can always rely on him. The girl is delighted, and he adds he will do everything he can. Tears fill Eren's eyes. She throws her arms around his neck, thanking him, and he can't believe she also wants to protect someone. Eren calls out to Iselin that she's the lucky one because the hero will probably choose her today. Tadashi says he didn't mean that. The girl says he'll just have to accept it. The hero feels a little annoyed but thinks the main thing is that her mood has really improved. A new day begins. He steps out of the hero's room with Liza when Eren suddenly appears from around the corner saying good morning and holding a mug, and Tadashi mumbles that Iselin is sleeping in a strange position. The hero left a spot on the bed for the girl. Eren says if she were braver, she would have done the same. Tadashi reminds them that she was the one hiding behind Liza, then laughs and says she's used to it. He thought he had strong endurance, but Iselin still threw him off balance. Later, the former queen woke up. Embarrassed, the hero turns away and says he needs to try again today. The girl does not understand what he means. Everyone heads to the fields. Tadashi says the wheat has already been harvested, and now it's time for sugarcane, barley, and hops. Iselin accepts the cane but wonders why there is so much barley and hops, and the hero explains it is for beer. The startled girl asks again. Tadashi is surprised that she really knows nothing about beer. Iselin admits that on the island they only brewed a barley wine without hops and used it more as a medicinal drink. The hero learns from the girl that ancient wine did not contain hops. He says the drink could replace water because it did not spoil even on long sea voyages. Tadashi imagines their drink as a true gift from the gods and wants the barley wine to have a unique taste worthy of being called the drink of the heavens. The hero asks Iselin if any of them are master brewers. Iselin says there is one, blessed by the same gods as he is. Tadashi asks the hero to introduce him. Merle, a cook, steps forward, listens closely, nods, promises to do everything she can, and Tadashi thanks her sincerely for her dedication. He says he's already prepared the barrels so Merle can take them for work. The hero himself is heading to the smithy. The girl answers confidently that he can rely on her. Tadashi steps into the forge tent and asks Asya about the nails. Smiling, Asya says everything is ready and that she repaired the old tools so they can be used again. She warns that working too fast will break even the best tools. The serious tone of her words makes the hero think. Tadashi sees no point in melting iron down every time. It would be better to restore it with magic steel, but supplies of this rare material are very limited. The hero calls Karuru. When she appears, he asks her for legs to use at work. Karuru responds gladly and gives him what he needs without hesitation. Tadashi realizes Karuru can lead them straight to the forest where the steel is. He tells the creature to restock their water and travel together along the river. The hero flies over the current, gathers water, and with it catches a huge fish called the devil salmon, an unexpected but valuable trophy. The action shifts to the northern forest. Chopping trees, the hero prepares to head to the nearest mountain. He calls for Karura, and she finally appears before him, summoning his strength. Tadashi swings his axe and shouts, "Dig yourself out," as he strikes the mountain. Huge stone blocks fly in all directions from his devastating swing. The hero, pleased with the loot, says the mountain was only a lure, then turns to Karuru and orders him to finish the job and return. They return to the village. Asya greets them warmly while Tadashi lays out piles of supplies and fuel before her, and the amazed girl can hardly believe her eyes. She asks what is happening. The hero says he thought it would be enough. Asya, confused, says Tadashi brought too much material. She stresses she cannot handle such a workload in the forge alone, and asks Tadashi to find helpers. The boy only watches silently. The hero starts working at the forge himself, certain everything is prepared, and it's time to work alongside the carpenters, his hands confidently taking up the task. He brings a new tool to the carpenter, and she, delighted, says it is amazing, then takes it and works with it easily and skillfully. Tadashi explains this is a plane and says it works great, producing results clearly better than ordinary tools. The carpenter says the screws the hero brought hold far better than nails, and emphasizes that this made the work much more efficient. A beastman shouts that everyone must do whatever it takes for their king. Others agree. Tadashi feels their unity can create real miracles. Asya speaks. He turns at her voice, and she says it is time to rest, but he does not understand what she means. Asya shows him that Island, who controls all the robots, is already exhausted. Only now Tadashi realizes what she means and begins to worry. He thinks the corporate resilience he carried from his past life harmed his subordinates. His example wore others out. Asya asks permission for a break for everyone. The hero agrees, knowing that rest is necessary. Relaxing, he slowly sips his drink. Karuru swims up to him with a large shrimp in its teeth. Tadashi smiles and offers to fry it. While tending a fire, the hero notices a strange plant and, thinking it over, comes up with a new idea that could help everyone. Asya asks what he has come up with now, and Tadashi says he is making liquid soap from coconut oil, roasted seaweed, and a little salt, leaving it to mature. Delighted by the scent, the girl says the soap smells wonderful, and Tadashi only smiles and adds that the soap makes you want a hot bath right away. In a large bathtub, the hero realizes that although he'd done a lot of work, it turned out easier than he'd imagined, and now he can take a break. A sudden noise behind him makes him look back, and Erin rushes in, staring at the wondrous pool, while the boy invites her to try it herself. The girl presses the lever and watches happily as water pours, while Tadashi shows the beast people's ruler the showers, and Eri enjoys putting her face under the stream. Impressed, she asks how the device works, and the hero explains that he put a huge tank of hot water up high so it flows down under its own weight. Tadashi believes the key is to picture the end goal, because with a clear idea you can create almost anything, even if it seems impossible at first. The hero announces the end of the day and tells everyone to relax in the bath, reminding them they are already in their swimsuits so they can go in, while Erin impatiently calls the others. Slipping into the water, he feels calm and smells cypress in the air, remembers how long it has been since he last bathed, and believes this pool can restore his life. Suddenly he hears footsteps, turns, and freezes in surprise as a group of girls not wearing swimsuits walks toward the bathhouse, leaving him speechless. Embarrassed, Tadashi asks why they're naked, and Eren smiles, saying he feels freer, and decided to use the moment to get to know each other better. She naively reminds him that the hero said it himself, but he hurriedly denies it, explaining he did not mean that at all and becomes increasingly embarrassed. Suddenly, Eren rips off the hero's underwear, and the hero cries out in despair, demanding that these antics stop, but the girl just grumbles that he's too boring. Without pausing, she snatches Isolin's towel, prompting Tadashi to snap that she has crossed the line and to warn her she will face punishment if it continues. Hearing this, Eren immediately apologizes awkwardly, and the hero tells her to go wash up as another girl quietly walks past him. Lisa apologized for the inconvenience and asked them not to be angry with Eren, explaining that he had been tense the whole time because of her antics. Tadashi says he doesn't hold a grudge because Eren is still a child, and he thinks about how hard this must be for Liza herself. He worries the people from the principality, as well as the elves and beastmen, might have been rude to her, but Lisa assures him everything was fine and says the commander there was a woman. Surprised, the hero notes that a woman led the national army and finds it unexpected for a border principality. Liza explains that the real target was not the Flounder Islands, but that they were used as a forward base to attack the demon kingdom from the opposite side. According to her, they had their own soldiers and resisted desperately, but the enemy commander, despite being of royal blood, was cruel. Liza still remembers how this woman personally went to the front and with a single blow killed several soldiers, a scene that stayed with her forever. She says she lost her arm then, and Tadashi is stunned by this extraordinary story, and even though Lisa is blessed, he does not want to make her an enemy. The girl explains the duchy needed food for the army, so they agreed to supply provisions in exchange for the safety of their people, becoming a living treasury. The hero recoils in disgust, thinking the duchy may have wanted to disarm the elves, tax them and turn them into slaves, and he sees that tactic as dirty and despicable. Timidly, Liza asks to pose a personal question, and when Tadashi agrees, she leans in and whispers in his ear. She asks how he can stand a girl being so close, and when she sees he's embarrassed, she quickly apologizes, afraid she may have offended him. Awkwardly, Liza admits she is curious how he manages to keep his composure around Lady Isoline, let alone someone like her, and she blushes. Tadashi blushes but admits Lisa is worthy and attractive, and Lisa smiles gratefully, saying it's the first time a man has told her that. After a moment's thought, he suddenly advises her to set boundaries and draw a clear line. But she looks at him in surprise, not understanding what he means. The hero says that once the beer is ready, he wants to hold a festival to honor the gods and even arrange a Shinto wedding. Liza reflects on the words about the wedding ritual, especially the Hatsuhana ceremony, and the hero asks whether it truly is an ancient elven custom. Liza explains that at a spring festival, girls give flowers to the man of their dreams, and if he accepts them, they are considered married. She sadly adds that during the occupation they had no freedom, and were forced to fight just to survive. The hero concludes that in their culture women propose, and thinks this custom is why Isoline is so persistent. Lisa asks what kind of wedding he would like to see. Tadashi mentions a wedding cake, luxury clothes, and exchanging rings. The girl smiles, it sounds like a big celebration. He figures an engagement to Isoline will need wedding dresses, rings, and the right ingredients for the cake. The hero is already thinking about it when Irina's voice comes from behind him. She asks if Lisa is talking to the king alone and immediately says he is marrying everyone. Hearing this, the girls immediately turn to the hero. Tadashi protests he never said that, but no one listens. He sadly thinks it's pointless to explain and senses a new commotion about to begin. The next day, the hero sets a new goal, preparing for the wedding, and has already asked to have alcohol brewed and ordered a wedding dress from seamstress Lola. Only the rings and the cake remain, but he still does not know which ingredients to use for the cake or where to find the gemstones. Asiya suddenly calls out to him, loudly saying that something bad has happened. The hero suggests she take a short break, but the girl replies that now is not the time. She pulls him over to look and shows him the gems. Tadashi, surprised, says they are diamonds, rubies, and sapphires, but Asiya explains they are mixed with magical minerals. The hero remembers once bringing materials to the blacksmith, convinced that magical minerals would not mix with others, but he was wrong. Still, he is glad Asiya found them, since he'd already been worried about the rings. The girl asks permission to make them herself. Tadashi immediately agrees and says he trusts her completely. Asya gratefully promises to forge the rings with the pride of a master. The hero is glad the ring problem is solved and now needs to think about the cake, but they have no milk or eggs, so they must find livestock. Confused, he stops as Kururu suddenly takes off, scoops him up, and carries him toward the forest. The hero asks where it's heading and whether going that deep is safe, but the creature only hums in reply. Deep in the forest, they stop, and Kururu begins to growl as Tadashi senses someone dangerous hiding nearby. A scene opens before him with many cows and roosters. The hero calls to them and offers food. The animals ignore his words. Kururu gives a low, threatening growl, and the creatures flinch in fear. Tadashi sees that these wild creatures are like children and need to be tamed, and he promises to show them a place with better water and food if they give him milk and eggs. Kururu growls again, and the animals obey, ready to follow the hero. Sitting on Kururu's back and leading the animals behind him, the hero thinks taming them is not so hard. The beast growls happily in response. Returning to the village, he thinks raising livestock is an inseparable part of the agriculture people practice. Aaron and Iseline approach him. Iseline says she heard about his first flower ritual and prepared seeds, but what she sees suddenly shocks her. The hero thanks them for the seeds, explains that the cowshed and chicken coop are a good fit, and suggests planting flowers beside them. Surprised, Aaron tells Iseline that these chickens and cows look very strange. Iseline replies that they are demonic creatures, and that they are real. Aaron asks whether demonic cows and chickens can be tamed, and Iseline replies seriously that neither humans nor magical creatures can tame them. Aaron points ahead. Tadashi strokes the demon bird's head and says softly that it's time to lay tasty eggs. Tears well up in the bird's eyes. Aaron wonders why the demonic beast is crying. Tadashi realizes that in legends these creatures were not tamed, but subdued. Iseline explains this is why Fenrir guarded them. Aaron thinks for a moment, then asks if that means demonic creatures could become a fighting force. Iseline does not immediately grasp what he means. Aaron says they already have more than 30 of those terrifying beasts. If the prince's army attacks, these creatures could serve as their defense. At last, Iseline sees the truth and warns that everyone must now stay alert, because danger can come at any moment. The hero suddenly calls Aaron and Iseline, inviting them to take eggs and milk. There are so many that everything looks surprisingly appetizing, and the girls stand frozen in surprise. Tadashi says taming the demonic creatures will make things easier in the future. The girls understand how dangerous that is, since the creatures are not tamed at all. Lola and Asha approach the hero. Lola proudly shows the wedding dress and says it turned out beautifully. Asha brings a sapphire for the wedding ring. Tadashi beams with genuine joy, says he never doubted them, likes the ring, thanks Asya for her trust and support, and the girls glow with happiness. Lola insists they must start mass-producing dresses immediately. Asha says she needs to make the rings to exact sizes. The hero stops them and says they should taste the bread first. Everyone is surprised. Maru brings a just-baked loaf that smells fresh. The bread looks incredibly appetizing. The hero also shows the first batch of alcohol. Everyone is amazed at how much Tadashi has already done. Lola first mistakes the drink for raw ale, but it's actually cold beer. She savors the taste. The hero says light beer is best served cold. Asha notes the drink is very rich. Tadashi says the world's magic and divine protection are finally showing up in ordinary things. The girls try the beer with bread. The hero explains that simple magic can cool or heat food, but life magic makes cooking incredibly easy and perfect. Confident the oven turned out well, he thinks he can bake a wedding cake and whip fresh cream and butter. At that moment, Maru speaks to him. She says the hero is kind to everyone but doubts someone like her could get married. Tadashi is stunned and doesn't understand. He asks if the girl wants to marry him. Maru objects, explaining she has a child and asks whether he minds. Tadashi is stunned. Maru says her husband Cornell was killed in the war with the principality, leaving her a widow at 28. She says she is proud of her husband and remembers him with honor. The hero replies that the brave warrior and his deeds should always be remembered. A small girl rushes into the room. The hero asks if she is really Maru's daughter. The girl confirms and says her name is Petya as she hugs her mother tightly. The hero thinks Maru was left alone with her child after the war, and he realizes it will be hard, but she is determined to find happiness again. Maru says if she marries the hero who saved the island, her husband will be happy too, and she promises to raise their daughter and have more children. Tadashi quietly drinks a shot, then says he understands they must get married and tells Petya she can call him dad. The girl agrees happily. Maru thanks him for granting permission to her daughter. The hero adds that after the wedding, the girl will be able to call him by his name. Tadashi feels he did the right thing. The wedding day is approaching. Preparations are in full swing, and the small village of 100 people is becoming a town. He lists the lavish table: wild vegetable salad, fragrant bread, spicy seafood soup, tender steak, and a peach wedding cake. Iselin calls him. He turns to see a crowd of girls in wedding dresses saying they are ready, leaving Tadashi confused and embarrassed. He realizes he didn't check beforehand how many brides there would be. Marrying 7 women at once was not something he expected. Iselin asks if everything is all right. The hero replies yes, but inside he hesitates because this kind of marriage seems ethically dubious, yet he accepts it as the island's custom. Barry says Tadashi is too generous, and any friendship he has ends in marriage. The hero looks puzzled, not understanding those words. He insists it is not true and asks them not to spread nonsense. The girls admit those kinds of rumors are spreading among people. The hero realizes they have come a long way together, and even if it was all out of necessity, he does not regret it. Iselin offers to exchange vows, but the hero suggests they first taste the divine blessings and then begin the meal. The gods themselves appear before them. Kronos, god of agriculture, greets the hero and admires his strength. Vulcan, god of the forge, hands the hero a cup. The girls stare in shock as Tadashi takes a drink and jokes that thanks to the gods he has more connections than before. Vulcan says he's been waiting for this day and likes everything about it. He is the first to try the drink the hero made and calls it excellent. Perono points out that manners do not suit him, and Vulcan laughs, saying drinking is not a high art. At that moment, someone calls out to the hero. A girl asks who those two are. Tadashi says they are gods and that he made offerings at the altar, so they came down to share the meal. Desperate, a girl cries that this is unnatural, and the hero realizes the situation is again sliding into chaos he can barely contain. The girls are amazed that the gods really came. The hero explains that with the right offerings, they always appear to taste the dishes. The girls stare at him in stunned silence. Kronos notices the other gods who have just arrived. He scolds Mia and Helka Barrett for arriving with gloomy faces, even though Tadashi worked so hard to prepare the treats. Mia, goddess of wisdom, says Kronos had the right to choose whether to come. Gelkabara, god of heroism, says they do not support specific mortals. Kronos rebukes the god of heroism for stubbornly resisting because of his armor, and the god replies angrily that there is nothing wrong with that. A quarrel breaks out among the gods, so Tadashi steps in and says the gods work hard too and deserve to enjoy the meal. The god of heroism tastes the starter and is delighted by its flavor. The hero explains it is a seaweed and seafood soup. Kronos notes that Tadashi's dishes customarily receive 7 stars from the patron of agriculture. Mia studies the oxtail soup with curiosity and notes that even long ago such refined offerings were rarely made. Kronos summons the goddess of healing and says they've prepared a lot for them, so she should try some too. Alicia modestly says she did nothing. Tadashi thanks her for the herbs and invites her to taste the dishes as a sign of gratitude. She agrees but believes it is the hero's own doing. Tadashi is surprised that the goddess began to eat meat so eagerly. He is really surprised that Alicia enjoys meat. Then Iselin turns to her and says the goddess always looks after them. Alicia looks surprised. Iselin asks if she has any worries. She says no and adds that Islin's faith in her is priceless. She advises the elf to hold on to that faith. Iselin is pleased to hear such sincere words from the goddess of healing. Kronos asks Tadashi if people call him the god monster Oda. Tadashi repeats the question, surprised. Kronos explains that this god cares for magical beasts. Tadashi remembers that Kuru brought Mr. Oda, and he had completely forgotten about it. He hits the dragon figurine, and the god monster Oda appears before them. The hero asks what to serve him. Kronos says he eats everything only in large quantities. The hero gives him a portion of food, and Oda first tastes it cautiously, then eats every last crumb, surprising Tadashi. Tadashi asks Maru if she wants more, and she says yes. Vulcan says the wine is gone and asks for a whole barrel, and the hero smiles and promises to bring everything right away. The gods feast happily, enjoying food and drink. Tadashi asks Kronos to conduct the wedding ceremony while everyone is gathered. Kronos smiles and says he would be glad to do it. The hero insists they must marry before Kronos and the other gods who support them, believing only then will their union receive the true blessing and recognition of the heavens. Kronos says that as the god of agriculture, he will grant them a bountiful harvest and many descendants, and that the role of wedding witness suits him because he can be trusted without reservation. The ceremony begins. Tadashi feels relieved that at least Mr. Kronos stayed sober and smiles, aware how important that is for the ritual's order. The wedding ritual begins. The hero explains that the island has a first flower tradition, but the locals have never seen a wedding ceremony like this. Everyone watches in wonder. Tadashi tells Kronos it is time to recite their vows and exchange rings and lilies that symbolize the purity of their union and their eternal devotion. Kronos notes that polygamy is common in their world, but he's never seen a wedding ritual like this, and it reminds him a lot of Tadashi, which surprises the hero. Kronos suggests they say their vows in the temple, and the hero gladly agrees. Then he hears a voice calling him and realizes it belongs to his fiancées. All 7 brides step forward and offer him their flowers. The embarrassed hero asks them to come one at a time so he can properly honor each. He slips a ring onto each girl in turn. They beam with happiness as they accept the symbolic gift and feel a truly solemn moment. Deeply moved, Kronos declares this a truly happy union, blesses their future descendants with prosperity, and Tadashi sincerely thanks him for his words. Kronos scolds the other gods for not preparing gifts for the newlyweds, while Vulcan just shrugs, not knowing what to bring. Kronos suggests it might be a new star under heavenly protection, and Mia replies that the god of agriculture is talking nonsense. Kronos accuses her of stinginess, and she replies that giving such a gift would upset the order of the earthly world, but Alicia still supports Kronos in his plans. She suggests giving each bride a star. Aislane hears this and literally beams with joy, unable to believe it could be possible. Mia says angrily that she objects to such gifts. Kronos reminds her that she is the only one who has not tasted the offerings. Mia then turns to Tadashi. She says she ordered the wisest merchants from among her followers to be brought as a gift. The hero thanks her sincerely and thinks they are probably traders from the borderlands. Aaron suddenly appears. Tadashi asks her if she received the gift, and she replies that she did, saying it came from the god of heroism, Mr. Helcabarus. The hero flatly says he will not marry Aaron. She jokes that his wishes have become too free and ambiguous. She says she's joking, since it's still too soon to see the hero that way, and she'll later decide whether she wants it. Tadashi realizes he never brought up that topic and now understands how hard life will be with 7 wives all at once. Suddenly, Aislane says she is happy to become his wife. The other girls all echo her words, saying they too are filled with joy. The hero says he's just as happy as they are, and admits that in his past life he never imagined he could get married. He wonders what it would be like to be alone forever. Now, in this world, everything is different, and he is not alone. Girls whisper in awe that the king can make even the gods come down to earth. Others say it's only natural, since he is blessed and a legend himself. They call Tadashi the most important king recognized by the gods and say he is an incredible cook, so the gods' visit is entirely justified. The hero believes the village will soon no longer belong to anyone and will become a sacred place, so he decides it is better to develop the land than to live in uncertainty. So began the legend of Tadashi, the king of food. The wedding ceremony lasted all night. Aislane even asked the girls to line up by breast size. Liza shyly asks if her breasts are too small, and if she will be ignored. And the other woman says, tastes vary, and that Tadashi himself does not judge just by that. With a sad smile, the hero thinks the girls are arguing without end, and will not reach an agreement, then tells them everyone is tired from the day and it is time to rest. The girls flatly refuse to go to bed, and Maru suddenly asks Tadashi whether he has any experience at all, making Tadashi blush and awkwardly ask what she means. Maru points out that none of the others have any experience, so trouble could arise, and her persistence presses so hard that the hero almost feels it as a physical force of persuasion and doesn't know how to respond politely. Tadashi suggests Maru tell everyone at once, and she gladly agrees, saying she needs a partner for hands-on practice, which freezes the hero and makes him once more ask uncertainly what she means. Embarrassed, he says he is ashamed, because even if someone could help, there will never be another like her. So a conversation like this feels too direct for tonight. Maru says she could recommend Ship, a half-beast girl about his age, and Tadashi inadvertently realizes Maru is gently trying to bring them together as a practical example. Spike steps in and says she can guide the process as a mentor, assuring the hero he can treat her as invisible so no one feels awkward during training. Deciding it's at least a compromise, the hero agrees and hears Maru ask him not to overdo it and to rely on her cues, while Spike smiles and politely greets him as a student. The next morning, Tadashi asks Maru to explain how she sees the plan moving forward and whether everything went as they agreed the day before. A girl asks for permission to speak, gets it, and says everything is fine. Maybe too fine. The test passed. But now Tadashi is in danger and the hero has no idea. Maru raises her voice and warns him to be aware of the risk, because if he relaxes even a little, his partner, not controlling her strength, could accidentally cause him fatal harm. Tadashi realizes the cause is the 7-star physical power the god of farming gave him, and that this power can make any careless move dangerous for them both. Regaining his composure, he keeps going to the royal garden where duties await, since responsibility to the people matters more than embarrassment. Migrants from the Kambara archipelago are arriving en masse at the settlement of the divine descendant. The kingdom of Tadashi is rapidly expanding, and the county of Frontrunner quickly learns of this sudden prosperity. The action moves to the county capital of Frontrunner, a state born from 100 soldiers and one brave man that later grew into a power with a large army and great ambitions. The ruler's only daughter, Matilda von Frontrunner, sits among piles of papers, bored by endless reports, but she does not complain because her father entrusted her with important work. Eugen von Fontaine arrives and respectfully reports to the pensive Matilda, who looks up and moves from her thoughts back to her tasks. He reports alarming activity on the Kambara archipelago, and Matilda asks if it is a key base for an attack and what is really happening there. Eugen says reports show resources do not meet the needs of even half the archipelago's population, threatening instability and new uprisings. He warns that excessive taxes could drive people to leave en masse, so the problem must be resolved quickly or they will lose control. Matilda curtly orders them to leave everything as it is, and when Eugen objects, she calls for the commander-in-chief, who mumbles about proper respect for such orders. He repeats that people are still in the country and the decision must be weighed, and she replies that the counterattack plan is almost ready, so there is no point in exploring the islands. Noticing his disappointment, Matilda apologizes for her bluntness and steps to the window to look at the city that could pay the price for any mistake she makes. She now sees defeating the Magic King as the top priority, and if they miss the right moment to strike, the country could vanish from the map. Only one path remains in her mind, a direct advance and total victory, because retreat would mean the slow death of the state. Return to the Divine Village. Tadashi works in the field and counts more than 5,000 newcomers, and the number keeps growing each day. Even with so much land, expanding the fields did not yield enough crops. And at that moment, someone called the hero's name, pulling him out of his thoughts. Isolene rides on Kururu's back, crying out about trouble, and Tadashi immediately asks what happened and whether help is needed right away. Isolene explains that new applicants for resettlement have arrived, and the protagonist asks cautiously why that is a problem if the settlements are open. According to the girl, whole hordes of gnomes and cat demons keep arriving one after another, and this is a matter of primary importance because the scale is staggering. An unfamiliar girl arrives at Kururu, and Tadashi asks Isolene to introduce her, wanting to know right away who they are and why they came. The girl steps forward and gives the hero a challenging look, asking whether he really is Tadashi the farmer they call the king of this land. Surprised, the hero asks who she is, but Isolene cuts in sharply, calling the stranger a traitor and the leader of the cat demon caravan. Smiling, the girl says she is pleased to meet them and introduces herself as Shinku, leader of a trading caravan with cat ears. Aisline says wryly that it's a rather odd name for a trading caravan. The hero calmly adds that cat demons belong to the cat race. Shinku explains it is easier to remember this way. Their symbol is the cat everyone loves, with ears and a tail. She asks the hero if he is truly reborn. She remembers that the goddess Mia presented him to her followers, because he blessed this land, built a village, and instantly plowed the fields, so she thought he had been reborn. Shinka asks permission to explore the surrounding area for the future. The hero agrees but says he must meet the dwarves who have arrived here. Aisline offers to take on some of the work and accompany Shinku while the hero visits the gnomes. Tadashi agrees and says he relies on her. The hero climbs onto Kororu's back alone, tells them not to wait too long for him, and heads off to meet the dwarves. Reaching the spot, he sees a group of dwarves ahead and approaches. One of them calls to him, asking if he is King Tadashi, and the hero answers yes and asks if that dwarf is their leader. The gnome confirms his identity and introduces himself as Ovarin, head of the gnome community of the Great Mines in the Principality of Frontrain. Tadashi says they have enough land, so the gnomes can live here. He promises to restore the trees and food to proper levels and suggests they settle in the mountains by the village mines. The hero says that in the mountains, besides magic ore, you can even find gems, and Ovarin, surprised, asks whether Tadashi is really revealing such an important secret. Tadashi says it is one of Mr. Barkin's instructions, so he does not doubt it and trusts Ovarin. The gnome breaks into tears of joy, calls the hero generous, and vows that from now on both his hands will serve King Tadashi for the rest of his life. The hero notes that he is slightly exaggerating. Tadashi offers his hand to Ovarin and urges him to go to the mines at once, now that they are comrades in arms, and the gnome grips his hand firmly and says he will stand shoulder to shoulder with him. The hero now thinks a mining settlement will rise in the north, owned by Ovarin and the other dwarves, and he will supply them with all the necessary goods. In the south, on Kanbar Island, thousands of settlers will arrive, and cat demons have already begun preparing to build an international trade port. They also decided to build a fortress by the river at the center of each town to serve as the base for a new kingdom. Shinku reports that trade is going according to plan, but stresses that exporting magical iron and steel is strictly forbidden. Tadashi wonders why they cannot be exported. A young woman explains that the county is preparing for war and that weapons of magical iron and steel will give their country a decisive advantage. Aisline asks which war is being referred to. Shinku replies that allowing that many people to relocate would effectively be a declaration of war. Aisline says she and her people will leave the island as soon as they repay their debts, adding that the land was meant from the start for those who could not live in the principality, so the principality will hardly notice the change. Shinku confirms it, calling her words true because the people of Kanbar Island have nearly vanished and are still fleeing, adding contemptuously that the county's top officials are fools. Shinku says she will prepare a counterattack plan that accounts for various possibilities, and Tadashi says he is counting on her because he knows nothing about military matters. Shinku says he can count on her, and Ovarin adds that the gnomes will do everything they can for their king. Aisline assures that this time neither the elves nor the island's half-humans will betray, as happened before. Shinka mockingly warns her that if they attack first, they will immediately run to the nearest fishing village. Aaron tells the girl she can be brave on her own. Shinku replies sarcastically that she then wants to hear a real plan from her. The hero tries to separate them. He says he is waiting for ideas from both. Shinku concludes that even if the county's army is strong, a disciplined, precise attack can turn the battle in their favor. She says the battle's outcome will depend only on Tadashi's strength, but the hero, surprised, asks what she means, not understanding her hint. The girl explains that his divine power comes from heaven, and Shinku heard this power can cleanse all these lands of corruption and darkness. The hero admits he doubts his ability to fully control such power, and believes his strength may not be enough for the battle. Shinku tells Tadashi not to sell himself short, reminding him that his strength has already brought prosperity to these lands, while Tadashi looks at her, bewildered. Tadashi replies that he will consider her words, aware that he is prepared to use every bit of his power to defend those close to him because as king his duty is to protect the people. The scene shifts to Front Rain County at the Century Palace, where Matilda cries out in outrage when she learns a large mine, once their country's main hope, has been opened. News reaches her that workers are disappearing one by one without a trace. She cannot explain why and realizes that without making weapons, their army is doomed. Ogin appears suddenly, apologizes, and brings something to Matilda, and she asks what it is, and he says it is connected to the events that happened. Ogin says these mushrooms were picked on the border of Gonball Island, and they don't grow in such numbers on their land, while the girl tastes one without understanding the hint. Ogin explains it means people fled to more fertile lands. Matilda objects, arguing that places like the land of their dreams simply do not exist. Ogin continues, reporting the investigation results that a new kingdom has appeared on the border and may be sheltering the missing. Matilda says she has heard of those border areas that have long been uninhabitable and does not believe people could have left their country and fled there. Annoyed that the escape happened just before the Demon Kingdom's counterattack, she asks who can handle the task. Suddenly, a voice is heard behind the door. General Graham of the Celestial Stars entered, a 4-star commander who wields a magic sword. He asks permission to destroy the new kingdom. Matilda asks Ogin whether she should allow it, but he flatly refuses and warns her about the danger of his methods. He asks to remember the events on Kanbar Island, when Graham's 100-man squad acted without orders, attacked the beast folk and burned an entire village. She says she is busy preparing and does not mind if Graham takes the case. The general replies cynically that she should have understood that earlier. Matilda refuses to budge when Ogin objects, announcing she will rely on Graham's squad, and Graham stares at her decision in shock. Matilda orders Graham not to let her down this time. Graham smiles and promises to live up to her expectations. Graham's squad heads for the island. A fighter says the rumors were true. Graham confirms that all the elves, beast folk, and others have already moved to the borderlands. He warns that if those people try to escape from them, it will be a fatal mistake, because he plans to profit again from other people's suffering. Graham orders his men to loot as much as they can and keeps for himself the task of getting the needed intelligence from enemy territories. The soldiers obey, and he is already planning celebrations after the operation. They enter the village and are surprised to find it completely empty. One warrior says the elves and beast folk vanished in an unknown direction. Suddenly a noise comes from the side. Demonic beasts rush at the squad. The soldiers are stunned and do not understand what is happening. Soldiers shout to spread out. One panicked soldier says an ordinary bird is pecking his hand, but it looks completely unnatural. Graham desperately fends off the beasts and shouts to the warriors to stay alert, warning that these are not ordinary creatures, but A-rank demonic cows and chickens, and orders all 5 to fight. It's odd that these demons are so aggressive. Graham realizes he was too complacent and must now be more cautious in these lands. Shinku, Aaron, and Tadashi watch from the bushes, and Shinku says that by using demonic beasts, they are weakening the enemy's forces, as Aaron predicted. Aaron asks Shinku why she stayed silent so long. Unexpectedly, the girl asks Tadashi to leave soldiers with her and Shinku. Tadashi asks whether she really intends to attack. Aaron says she will not forgive them for destroying her village, seeks revenge and plans to kill the invaders, while Tadashi tries to calm her, but the girl is determined that it must be done now or never. The girl urges the hero to leave quickly, and Tadashi realizes the fight is inevitable. Rushing forward, she thanks him for letting her attack, and the squad of beast people charges straight at the enemies with fierce cries. Beast folk charge into battle with furious roars, and their footsteps roll like thunder. Graham spins around, sees the attack, and is about to run when someone suddenly calls his name. Before him stands the ruler of the beast people, and he recognizes her at once. Wasting no time, the girl raises her sword and attacks swiftly. Graham widens his eyes in surprise as he notices her strange blade. With a cynical smile, he says, Aaron has good taste for wielding a magic sword, but hatred burns in the girl's eyes because that executioner burned her home village while Graham brazenly smiles again. Roaring that this time Aaron will burn in the flames, he enchants his sword with sulfuric acid. A menacing swing follows, but the girl dodges skillfully, leaving the attacker stunned. Graham can't understand how she escaped his spell. Speaking with cold certainty, the girl says he will not dare humiliate her again. She credits Tadashi with making her a 4-star warrior. Grem wonders why the sulfuric acid does not harm her body. Aaron attacks again without hesitation, and Grem's blows come in quick succession until she breaks his sword and mercilessly drives it through his chest. With the blade plunged into the enemy's body, the girl says through clenched teeth that this strike is for Cornell. Graham looks at her in horror, choking with pain and coughing as he loses strength. Gritting his teeth, Aaron shouts that it is time for Graham to leave this world, raises his gaze to hurl one last insult at her, but she resolutely pulls the sword from his chest. The girl freezes, lowering her blade in embarrassment, and Tadashi steps up to her. He quietly asks if she is all right, and Aaron, turning, says in a trembling voice that she managed to do it. The hero looks her straight in the eyes and firmly confirms she really did it, then adds that this victory belongs to them both and that they won the fight together. Action moves to the principality of frontrunner at the walls of the Castle of the Century. Matilda receives news that Graham's detachment was defeated, but refuses to believe the general himself, the bearer of the demon's sword, is dead. Ojan replies that it happened exactly like that. He explains that according to the few soldiers who miraculously survived, the squad was attacked by demonic beasts and beast people. The girl asks again, not believing her ears. She asks if the border kingdom really uses demonic beasts in battle. Ojan admits they underestimated the enemy. Matilda tightens her fists in irritation, but a moment later, he admits that even such news is very important. Ojan says they gather new information from refugees and traders leaving the country, and one of those reports arrived by letter from the kingdom of Tadashi. Matilda unfolds the message. Ojan adds that it covers several issues they want to discuss with the principality, including the problem of soldiers taken prisoner. Matilda insists she will go in person to discuss everything, and Ojan doubts she can manage on her own. As squad commander, she replies that she cannot abandon members of the order who were taken prisoner, and her voice carries unshakable confidence. Ojan looks at her in surprise, then agrees and says he will begin all the necessary preparations for the trip. Matilda admits with sorrow that the famed Order of the Heavenly Star was brutally defeated by beasts and beastmen, and she says it was a mistake to underestimate the threat and leave it unguarded. Ojan warns her against rushing into new decisions and tells her not to repeat past mistakes. The girl responds sharply that she is no longer a child to be lectured. Clenching her fists, Matilda stands her ground while Ojan sternly reminds her that even a leader sometimes must stop and soberly assess the situation. The young woman objects that they cannot waste time and orders preparations for an expedition to the Kambala Islands, with 2,000 knights and 20,000 legionaries who must set out as planned. Matilda says she will take another 1,000 riders. Ojan says he will escort her to the negotiations, and she agrees briefly. When they reach the island, everyone is surprised by the ports the kingdom of Tadashi is building, and they go to the pier while Matilda, suspicious, asks where they got so much money. Ojan says they are backed by the trading company Shinku and by the firm Cartier with the blessing of the god of wisdom. Matilda scans the harbors and notices no warships or large squadrons. She notes that despite all their wealth, their military strength seems meager. Ojan suggests they might be hiding their true power. Munchin points out that Tadashi's kingdom is backed by powerful demonic beasts from the borderlands, and says he has warned Matilda many times that she must never let her guard down. The girl angrily replies that she already knows that, when a greeting comes from behind. They turn and see Tadashi, who politely asks whether they have arrived as representatives of the principality. Matilda asks who he is, and the hero calmly introduces himself as Ono Tadashi, an ordinary farmer by trade who is also the king of this country. The girl is stunned that an ordinary person could cause such chaos, and Ogin leans toward Matilda and points to the hero's hand. He whispers that 9 stars of blessing shine on his palm, and Tadashi admits he often hears people call it strange, since he earned 7 of those stars for farming, blacksmithing, and heroism. Matilda refuses to believe he really has that many stars. Ojin insists she must accept it. Matilda protests angrily that they expect her to believe a made-up story about multiple blessings. Ojin says such a rich country could not be built on neglected lands, and only the blessing of the god of agriculture can explain it, but his words only make Matilda angrier. Tadashi steers the talk back to peace negotiations. Shinku explains that their demand is simple. They will release the captured knights and call off the invasion if the principality recognizes them and stays out of their affairs. Matilda calls it outrageous, reminding them that the heroes took 10,000 of her people. Shinku snaps back that this is exactly what happens when a principality declines. Tadashi reminds everyone that the principality is short on food. He proposes selling it cheaper via the trade routes, but Matilda refuses. The hero then asks directly what they need most. Matilda says her top priority is to bring back her people and the craftsmen, and she also demands that the beast people and elves be returned to the island. The dwarf chieftain replies that they came to Tadashi voluntarily, so they will decide for themselves whom to serve. The elves press close to the hero. They declare they are Tadashi's wives, and now belong only to him. Aaron adds that Matilda no longer has any power over them. Annoyed, Matilda says there is a legitimate ruler and she does not care about their choice, offering to become a vassal of the principality in exchange for protection from the demon lord's threat. Aaron replies angrily that they cannot accept those terms because the principality has long failed to meet its obligations. Matilda says coldly that if they refuse her offer, she will simply go home. Matilda and Ojin return to the principality. Ojin tries to speak, but Matilda cuts him off, saying everything has gone even better than she expected, and they must immediately prepare to ferry the army to Kamba Island. She says their troops are attacking the Tadashi kingdom right now. Ojin, shocked, asks whether they really intend to use military force against the demon state. He reminds them they do not know the true military strength of the kingdom of Tadashi, and Ojin stresses that without reliable information, starting a war would be a serious breach of military principles. Matilda replies that they must launch a surprise attack for that reason. The enemy already has at least 10,000 demonic beasts, and waiting until they have more would be suicide. She says they'll have to fight both the demon kingdom and the Tadashi kingdom at once. This is no game, but they have no choice. Matilda asks Ogin whether he has seen those fertile lands. She says that if everything goes well, they will easily double their army, and then victory over the Demon King's forces will be theirs. Ajin asks whether she really wants to gamble the principality's survival. Matilda replies that in their situation, taking a risk is the only way to survive. As commander-in-chief of the principality's army, head of the Order of Knights, and the prince's representative, she declares that she orders a surprise attack on the kingdom of Tadashi. Matilda stresses that if they do not push back, they will only make their situation worse in these lands. Ojin bows his head and says he understands her and will carry out the order out of respect. The action moves to Kanbar Island. A soldier approaches Ogin and reports they repelled an attack by demonic beasts. Ogin notes it was not easy. In the end, most of the monsters were destroyed. Despite the demon's strength, an army of 20,000 proved unbeatable. Ogin decides it is time to end Lady Matilda's invasion of the port. He orders a soldier onto a ship to deliver a report to Lady Matilda. The order is carried out at once. Ogin thinks the city has plenty of food and the supplies keep coming. Now all that's left is to pray she does not make a fatal mistake. He tells Matilda that the shoreline is fully held and the demonic advance has been pushed back. The girl says confidently that she didn't expect anything less from him and calls it a big victory. Ojin watches her closely. He asks why they should not stop there, and Matilda looks puzzled and does not understand what he means. Ojin says they met resistance only from demonic beasts. His view is that the residents were evacuated inland, and the enemy anticipated their sudden attack. Matilda realizes even Ojin failed to carry out a surprise attack, and he reports a fortress has been built on the River of Sorrow that may house the enemy's main base. Excited, the girl shouts that Tadashi must be there too and tries to attack at once, but Ojin holds her back and urges caution. Matilda meets the warrior's gaze and says the greatest treasure of these lands is the very man they are searching for. She claims the fertile fields were created because of him, so she wants him captured alive. Ojin objects because he has 9 blessing stars. Matilda replies sharply that even if they overcome his power, they cannot compete without the blessing of agriculture, because their military strength is insufficient. She vows to stay vigilant and fight with all her strength. The ocean replies that it will go negotiate with King Tadashi, or they will lose to the demonic king. Victory is within reach now, he believes, but if they wear themselves out taking these lands, they will not hold up in the war against the demon. Matilda scolds him for saying there were so many traps and that he must not go alone. He replies coldly that he will go even to his death. He believes that destroying the main army in a single strike will doom the principality. The girl objects, insisting there may be no traps at all, and Ohin bluntly reminds her that her own teaching says not to act on whims. Matilda shouts at him, accusing him of arrogance. He cuts her off, saying that having many enemies is exactly the desired outcome. She angrily calls his name. Matilda decides a small number of soldiers is enough to hold the territory. She orders the entire army to destroy Rika's castle. This is her final order. The principality's army launches a fierce attack, and the hero, remembering past events, expected it. But a few residents remain in the port who could not escape. Tadashi hopes the prophecy will not come true. Suddenly, Eren flies up to him on Kura and reports there are over 200,000 enemies and only 3,000 are warriors. All the ships are approaching the island. Shinku, who sold information about the principality's army to the heroes, has devised a cunning plan, but even she is not sure of victory. Tadashi realizes the so-called royal castle is really just a wall of magical steel built around the fort. Shinku unexpectedly approaches him and asks what he is doing. The hero remembers her saying he can do great things and thinks about how to protect everyone. He knows he will not allow the principality to destroy his villages, towns, and the whole country he built with his own hands. He now decides to use all his strength to protect what he has created. Shinku watches him approvingly and, stepping closer, suddenly leans in. After kissing him, she steps back and says if he wins this war, she will let him marry her. The hero looks at her awkwardly and says she had always wanted this. She says the place chosen for the confession is right. Tadashi wonders if he should have said something before the kiss and hears that, in that case, he would have refused. Smiling, the hero thanks her for cheering him up, even with a joke. Shinku admits that it was so. The hero grows thoughtful and believes he made it through this journey thanks to the friends he met in the New World. He remembers the elf Aiz, the beast Eren, the dwarf Overon, the cat Sinka, and Fenrira Karuru, all who became like family to him. A memory surfaces of Kronos' words about the river of sorrow, poisoned by a lethal toxin, and with the blessing of agriculture he can cleanse its water and soil. The hero remembers once receiving this power and cleansing a river where nothing could live, and now, dipping his hand into the water, he begins to purify it with a blessing. Meanwhile, an alarm sounds on the enemy ship. Ojin and Matilda rush from their cabin at the sound of shouts. They are told the hull is leaking and a giant fish is leaping onto the deck. Stunned, Matilda asks what the monster is, and Ojin explains it is a fierce demonic creature called the devil salmon that lives in poisoned rivers. The girl says he looks like a creature from legends and asks why he appeared here, while Ojin suspects this might be Tadashi's power and worries about the army.